For the entirety of my life, I always had one friend, James. We became best friends ever since his family moved right next door. Until then, I would always stay inside, playing video games, and I would only go out to shoot hoops with my dad on the driveway. But ever since James moved into the neighborhood, we'd spend most of our time together. Our families even became close. All of us would celebrate Christmas and Thanksgiving together. He was like family to us. But as time went on and we got older, things started to change. Don't get me wrong, we would still be best friends, but we started meeting other people, especially in high school. But let me cut to the chase and tell you what exactly happened between me and James and why we're not friends anymore. One day, I was in school. The captain of the basketball team came up to me. James was there right by my side, next to my locker. "Hey, Mike, right?" he said while reaching out his hand. Yeah? Hey, Travis," I responded before shaking his hand. "You know, I saw you shoot hoops in the gym in free period. You're really good at it, and I think we have a spot on our team for you. What do you say? Meet you after class at tryouts?" Travis asked me. I was shocked. Of course, I wanted to be on the basketball team, but I never thought that I was good enough. I told him I'll be there, and after he walked away, I saw the expression on James's face. He looked disgusted, and I knew why. I knew about how he felt when it comes to jocks, but I didn't care. I loved to play basketball. After class, there I was, in the gym, by the door, with James next to me. I guess he had a need to protect me from the Neanderthals. That's what we would call people who played sports. All the other guys on the team were practicing, and I guess the huge smile I had on my face made James even madder. "Are you sure about this? I mean, look at them. They're hitting each other and then they laugh. Who does that? They must be missing some brain cells," James told me while nudging me with his elbow. I didn't say anything. Instead, I started walking towards Travis, the captain. It was like I was starstruck. "Hey man, you made it. Oh, and you brought your friend," Travis said while looking at James, who was sulking in the corner. "Yeah, of course I came. And don't mind him, he doesn't like sports, but he's a great guy if you get to know him," I told Travis. The next thing I knew, I was on the court passing the ball around. The coach seemed impressed, and seeing the look on his face gave me more confidence, and I performed even better. I was flying on the court, and when I hit a three-point shot from almost at the center of the court, everyone cheered me on. It was like I was in a movie when the geeky kid discovers a new side of him or something. After practice, Travis came to me. "So Mike, the coach wants a word with you," he told me before tapping me on the shoulder and walking away. I had a feeling the news will be good, judging from his smile. I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around, and there he was, the coach, with a jersey in his hand. "Congrats, kid. You're now part of the team. I never thought a brainiac could play as good as you," he told me before we shook hands. I was so excited. I was on the team. It was like a dream come true. Then I turned my gaze to the corner of the gym. I saw James with his arms crossed, frowning and looking at his feet. I went over and asked him what's wrong, showing him my jersey. I expected a congratulations or something, but he just wanted to get out of there. For the rest of the day, James was very upset, but I thought he'll just get over it. I didn't want to press him on with all sorts of questions like, "What's wrong and why are you upset?" But as I saw, he became angrier and angrier. I asked him if he wanted to hang out at my place and play some video games, but he just said that he needed some time for himself. I didn't know what that meant, but I just said okay. The next day, we were supposed to go to school, and to my surprise, James was much better. He called me early in the morning and asked me if I wanted to get a ride from him. He borrowed his mom's car, and I said yes. On the ride there, he seemed fine. But as soon as we got into the parking lot and he saw Travis, his expression changed. He became mad all over again. "What are you doing? We're here," I asked him after seeing that he doesn't want to get out of the car. "You go, I'll just hang back a while," he said. But that was just the beginning. He started acting weirder and weirder as the days went on. And each time he would see me talking to Travis, it was like he wanted to kill him. But one day, he completely snapped, and everyone saw him in the hallway. We were at my locker, and Travis came over. "Hey Mike, I'm having a birthday party tomorrow at my house. Can you make it?" he asked me. "Of course I could," I told him. "I'll be there." And then I looked at James. Travis felt bad and said that James could come, and that's when he started acting crazy. "Do you think I'm a charity case? Who do you think you are, you dumb jock?" James told Travis. But Travis retaliated. He didn't like being called a dumb jock, and he pushed James, making him fall on the floor. Everyone started laughing at him, and he got so mad that his face turned red. But he couldn't do anything. There was no way he could beat up Travis. So he took his bag and went through the door. I tried to call him, but his phone was off for the rest of the day. I assumed he just went home. I didn't speak to him all throughout the day, which was odd because we would talk all the time. Later that night, I got a text from him. He said to come to the park outside of town. The place was once a great playground for kids, but now it was just deserted. All the rides were either stripped of parts or broken down, and the entire park had a creepy vibe. I asked him what was he doing, but there wasn't any answer to my question. He just told me to come and see him, and in about 10 minutes I arrived. There wasn't anyone, so I called him. I heard his phone ringing. I turned around, and under a tree, far from the street lamp and under the shade, there he was. "Hey man, what's going on?" I asked him while I got closer. "Come and see something," he said. I continued to walk until I saw his face. He looked sick. His eyes were red and he had bags under them. I was confused and actually pretty scared. I saw that he had a knife in his hand. "Whoa, what's that? What are you trying to do?" I asked him. Then he grabbed something from behind a bush, and to my realization, it was Travis. He was tied up, his face was bloody, and from what I saw, he had difficulty breathing. "James, what the hell, man?" I tried to run towards Travis and free him, but James stuck his knife right into my face. "So, I see you're wearing that basketball jacket that you're so proud of. Take it off, now," James commanded me, and since he had a knife, I did what he said. "You know, Mike, I never thought you would sell yourself for an inflated balloon. I thought you were better than that, but I guess I was wrong. You're just like this pathetic bag of flesh here, all brawn and no brains," James told me. Then, before I could even answer his comments, he grabbed Travis by the hair and exposed his neck, putting the blade right on it. "Stop! Are you insane?" I asked him. "This is what happens when you cross me, Mike. Let this be a lesson to you," James said, as he started pressing the knife into his neck. I had no other option. I jumped at him, and we all tumbled over. The knife fell to the side, and I tried to keep James pinned to the ground. He started screaming, but I was stronger. "Relax, it's over, relax," I told him. Finally, it seemed that he snapped out of that enraging state that he was in. "Okay, I'm fine, let me go," he said. And so I did. He ran home and I freed Travis. He was so mad and wanted to go beat him up, but James was already gone. I tried to call him after everything settled, but he didn't respond, and I didn't see him at school either. After classes, I went to his house. "Hello, Mrs. Connolly. I couldn't get a hold of James. Is he in?" I asked his mom. James is in Florida with some relatives. He'll be staying there for a while. I'll tell him you dropped by," she told me before shutting the door in my face. That was the last time I heard anything about James, and soon after, his family moved away. Now it's like they were never here. The house is owned by other people, but the memories still remain.
The world was just getting better for me. I had spent years in the asylum, and it felt good to be back home with my parents. I watched as my mother cried in the arms of my father, her eyes falling back on me occasionally as I stood in the center of the room. "Liana," she said as she stood up, walking towards me. As a child, they tried to provide me with everything I needed. One thing that I wasn't allowed to have was a friend, so I made up friends in my head. My best friend was Maya, and she was always with me. One day, when I was outside, I got lost. I couldn't remember exactly what happened after that, but I knew that Maya kept me company. After I got rescued, I spent more time with Maya. I refused to go anywhere without her. Maya was glad to come out with me and didn't like it when I spent time with anyone else. So I kept to myself and stayed with Maya. My parents were advised that I should be taken to the psychiatric home where they discovered I had split personality. I kept trying to explain to them that Maya was real, but every time I tried to call her, she refused to come out. She would come to me later when I was alone in my room and tell me that she was scared that they were trying to take her away from me. I stayed in the asylum for a long time before they declared that I was fine. I didn't see Maya again. Here I was, after 4 years, standing in front of my parents and hoping they see that I was better. What I had was a defect anyway. That is what they called it. My mother's hug, as I have known, was enough to crush one's bones, but this hug at this very moment was comforting. I was glad to be back home. I opened my eyes to see my father wiping his tears. It was the first time I saw him cry. I missed him so much. "I prepared your favorite," my mother said. Immediately she dropped the hug. Her hands cupped my cheeks. I smiled. I was out of words. I remember the way I was annoyed when they had told me where I was going. It broke them too, but I didn't see it at the time. Love would still be love, but they loved me despite who I was, and that was all that mattered. Later that night, people came around to welcome me back home, those I should have gone to high school with. I was 14 when I saw the first therapist, and I was 15 when I was asked to be admitted into the asylum. Out of all who came to welcome me, a face stood out. She was about my age but taller with a slim stature. She stared at me intensely before walking up to me. "I am Maya," she said and turned back. "What?" She looked at me and smiled at me. I smiled at her even though she didn't see it before walking back into my room. Was she the same Maya? "Where have you been?" I asked, looking at her now. I saw that she's the one. She looked older than she used to, which was expected. "It's quite complicated." She walked into my room. I wanted to ask how she knew where my room was, but it's been such a long time and I didn't realize that I missed her. "What do you mean?" I asked. "You just stopped showing up." "I told you, those people kept me away from you," she said, her eyes filling with sadness. I sighed. "I've moved on, Maya. I think we should stay away from each other." I didn't want to go back to the asylum. She moved towards me with such speed that I didn't have time to react before her hand came up. The sharp metal which pierced my skin brought me back to reality. Her eyes were red from anger. The knife in her hand caused blood to form on my skin, but she didn't seem to care. She pushed me against the wall. I didn't quite understand why she was angry or what I did, but I begged and begged, but she didn't listen. The knife stayed in my skin, my blood gushing out like it was water. "I'll kill us both, then we can be together." The handle of the door which moved caused her to rush out the back the way she came in. I slipped to the ground and my mother's arm caught me, tears forming in her eyes. "Liana! John!" She called my father and in a flash he rushed in, shocked at the sight. "What happened? Who did this?" my dad asked. I tried to talk, but the only thing which moved were my eyelids. I got dizzy, and mother calling my name was the last thing I heard. I woke up to the sound of machines and the beats of my heart, which felt like it was in my mouth. I felt someone's hands on me. It was comforting, and only one person could give such comfort, my mom. I was not happy at the kind of trouble I gave her. The wrinkles on her face made her older than she actually was. I opened my eyes and I almost jumped out of bed. It wasn't my mom. It was Maya. Her eyes were as red as they were yesterday night. This time, she looked angrier. "You should have just let things end yesterday night." "I don't even know what I did to deserve what you're doing to me, Maya." She laughed and said I was the only reason she was still there. If I was gone, then she would have peace. She asked if I knew what it felt like not to be able to talk to the only person she cared about. "I'm sorry, Maya." That was the only thing I could say. I was too weak to fight back. The quick opening of the door turned my attention away from Maya, and by the time I turned back to her, she was gone. "Mom, Dad," I called as my mom came to sit beside me, examining my body like she was the doctor. "Who were you talking to?" Dad asked. "Maya," I choked out. "She was the one who stabbed me. I thought I'd never see her again." My mom started crying and my dad went to hug her. I wondered why they were looking so sad. The door opened again and I saw the nurses from the asylum. "No!" I yelled, struggling against them when they came to pick me up. They said I was the one that stabbed myself. I argued with them that it was Maya, but they said no one has ever seen her. I cried, not just because of what Maya did, but because of who I was, the girl with crazy imaginations that needed help and safety. And if Maya came to see me again, I'll make sure to kill her first.
It all started at the beginning of June. I just finished high school, but as it turned out, I was not that academically gifted. When it came to schoolwork, I would much rather hang out with my friends than focus on the homework. And the result of this was I wouldn't have a chance to go to college. But I didn't want to go anyway. I just wanted to work and make my own money. During that time, I found several places around town that would hire someone who had just finished high school. But I wasn't keen on working at a fast food restaurant or inflating tires at the local tire shop. It wasn't that I didn't like to work, but the pay was lousy. In my mind, I needed to make some serious cash. I asked around for job opportunities that paid well over a minimum wage. Unfortunately, no one had a lead. So, I just had to take the first job I found, which was one at McDonald's. I'm not saying that working there was bad or anything, but I just had a different vision in my mind. Anyway, I went in, talked to the manager, and before I knew it, I got a uniform and was expected to work the next morning. "Oh, God, I hate myself," I said while looking in the mirror early in the morning. I was all dressed up in that stupid uniform, wearing that stupid hat. But that's what I had to do. I had no choice. In about half an hour, there I was. I walked inside and went into the back to meet with the manager. "Good morning," she said while sipping on her black coffee, giving me a smile that made me contemplate my life. "Morning," I responded with a tired look on my face. The next thing I knew, she grabbed my hand. I didn't know what was going on, but she started showing me around the place. Then she explained my duties. I was in the back. I had to make the fries. "Glamorous," I said while inhaling the delicious smell of fried goodness. I had a coffee before we opened, and bam, I was working. The first customer came in, and shortly thereafter, a whole bunch of them arrived. "What's up with that guy?" I asked one of my colleagues while I was taking out the fries. "Oh, him? He walks in here every day and begs for food, but we all know he just throws it away. He wants money to get drunk," Maria told me. As I was working, the guy came into the McDonald's. He was wearing old, torn clothes, he had long, greasy hair, and a very bushy beard. "Give me some fries," I heard. I didn't want to look at him. "Give me some fries, kid," he yelled. I turned my head to the right, and he was staring right at me. I got back to what I was doing, and fortunately security came and escorted him outside. He then walked away and didn't come back for the rest of the day. Everyone seemed to know him, and they weren't bothered by him that much. But in that second, when I turned my head and looked into his eyes, I saw something strange. It was like he had something personal towards me. He had the same look my bullies used to have back in middle school. Anyway, as the day went on, nothing interesting happened. I just had my head so deep in those fries that I almost forgot to go home on closing time. "See you tomorrow, rookie," my manager told me while I walked out the door with the same smile she had that morning. "Yeah, see you," I responded. But all I wanted to do was to get out of there. I was so tired, and my feet hurt from standing all day. As soon as I got home, I took a shower and went straight to bed. The next morning, as I arrived at work, the same smile greeted me. "I guess I'll have to get used to this," I said to myself while I smiled back at the manager. A couple of hours later, the same guy came in. Again, he demanded fries and he kept his eyes on me. "Come on, sir, you have to leave the store," my manager said. But he did something that no one thought would be possible. He pushed the manager, making her fall on the floor right there in front of everyone. Security quickly came and dragged the man outside. While he was being forced towards the exit, he continued to say, "I'll get you, kid. I want my fries. You're gonna pay. With an evil look on his face. It gave me the creeps, and I told this to my colleague. She said she'd never seen him do something like this. He wasn't violent. All that he would normally do was come inside and ask for food, then leave without the security being involved. I guess he has something personal towards you, she told me while laughing and patting me on the back. But I didn't laugh. I was freaked out. The rest of my shift ended without any interruptions. But as soon as I got outside, in the parking lot, I felt eyes on me. I looked left and right, but there wasn't anyone there. It was weirdly quiet. I hopped on the bus and went home. For the entirety of the bus ride, I smelled something awful. I didn't know where it came from, but someone in that bus didn't shower for quite a while. Before I knew it, I was at my front door. While I was searching for my keys, I felt a hand grabbing me from behind. I got pulled back and fell on my stairs, hitting my head on the pavement. "Now I got you," I heard while still trying to get myself back together after the fall. I opened my eyes, and there he was. The homeless guy who had his foot on my chest, making it difficult for me to breathe. "Get off!" I yelled, but he continued to stare into my eyes with that evil look. I managed to get his foot away and tried to escape, but he caught up and tackled me. He started raining punches, and I was trying so hard to protect myself, but I wasn't a fighter. My vision started to get blurry, and a loud ringing started to impair my hearing. I guess I was getting beaten up pretty badly. "Hey!" I heard. It was a neighbor of mine. He saw the entire scene and came to help. "Get off of him!" he yelled. The homeless guy got up and took out a knife. Then, without saying anything, he attacked my neighbor. Everything happened so fast. By the time I got up, the two men were laying on the grass. "Are you okay?" I asked my neighbor while going to check on him. He said he was fine, but a blood stain confirmed otherwise. I called an ambulance, and they quickly took him to the hospital, where he made a quick recovery. By the time the ambulance and police got there, the homeless guy was gone. He, too, left some bloodstains on the grass, but there wasn't any sign of him. He didn't come to the McDonald's after that incident. I haven't seen him ever since. I just hope that even if he's still alive, he stays away from me.
Being home alone, there is nothing like it. You have time to yourself and you have time to put your thoughts in order. But that's not always the case. Sometimes it is a truly strange experience. Ever since I was a kid, I loved being home alone. I even loved the movie. But hey, that's a whole nother story. When my mom and dad would go to work and I didn't have school, I felt like I was the king of the castle. I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. True, I had to clean everything up before mom and dad got home, but it was well worth it. I would watch horror movies. I would listen to music my mom wouldn't let me enjoy. I would eat ice cream for lunch and cake for dessert. Yeah, that was the life. And as I got older, having time to myself really vibed with me. That's why when me and my girlfriend first got a place together, things felt a little bit weird. Don't get me wrong, I love her, more than anything on this entire planet, but time for myself was important too. And because she was around all the time, well, it cramped my style a bit. But I thought to myself, that's life from now on. I love her and I have to renounce this preference of mine. Anyway, let's get into the story about the time I experienced something that made me hate being home alone. Me and my girlfriend just started looking around for places to live. We had a decent income and could afford anything we needed, but nothing really clicked with us. All the houses that we saw were either too bland or too futuristic. I may sound conceited, but to each their own. After a couple of months of online searches and endless talks with realtors, we stumbled upon a place in a part of town that we didn't frequent. It was almost near the highway, but had an interesting backstory to it. The place was old. It was a 2-story house built over 200 years ago. It had tall walls, small windows, and an overall antique vibe. My girlfriend fell in love with it at first sight. She would already imagine herself as one of the characters in one of those history-based shows she watched. We shook hands with the realtor and paid the first month's rent. We moved in the very first day. We didn't have a lot of things, so the process wasn't a hassle at all. Everything was wonderful for a while. My girlfriend even bought some antique chairs she found at a flea market. They really fit into the theme of the entire house. "I'm so happy, baby," she would tell me. "I know, we finally got a place to ourselves," I would tell her before giving her a big hug and a kiss on the forehead. Nothing went on for the first couple of weeks, but then things started to change. Of course, everything happened when I was home alone. I would tell my girlfriend what happened while she was gone, but every single time she would just laugh and tell me I'm imagining things. But believe me, what I'm about to tell you is the whole truth. I know some people would consider me crazy, but I just need to get this off my chest. It was a typical Wednesday. My girlfriend was at work and I had a day off. Instead of going out, I decided to stay and maybe read a couple of pages from my favorite book and drink some tea. I had a pretty chill afternoon planned out. As I was flipping through the pages, I felt a cold gust of wind. I didn't pay any attention to it at first, but then a couple of minutes later, a second one made my hair stand up. I put the book on the table, and just as I got up to go and check if any of the windows were open, my book flew off the table. "What the hell is going on?" I said out loud while looking around. I then checked the windows and saw that none of them were open. As I was returning to the couch, a sound caught my attention. It sounded like someone was crying, but the crying was inside my house. May I remind you that I was alone. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I asked while my voice trembled. Crying stopped, but I still went upstairs to check it out. As I opened each door of the 3 rooms, I didn't see anything. Nothing happened for the rest of the day. Of course, I told my girlfriend, but as I mentioned before, she just laughed it off. A couple of days went by and nothing happened. You may wonder why. That's right, because my girlfriend was there. About 5 days later, she was out visiting her parents. Again, I was all alone. As I was brushing my teeth, I heard the same crying sound coming from the next room. I left the toothbrush at the edge of the sink and quickly went to see what the hell is happening. "Hey, who's there? I have a gun," I said in order to intimidate the intruder. The truth was that I was unarmed, but I said the first thing that came to mind. The crying stopped. I checked every nook and cranny. Nothing was out of the ordinary. I went back into the bathroom, and what I saw written with toothpaste on the mirror made me at a loss for words. "Why did you abandon me?" I didn't know what to think about it. Then the rest of the day went on as normal. I didn't wipe the writing on the mirror. I wanted my girlfriend to see. As soon as she got home, I told her everything. "Come on, who's crying? You are all alone here. You're imagining things, believe me," she said. "I'm not. There's something wrong with this place. I think it might be haunted," I told her, but my theory quickly made her laugh almost to tears. "Oh yeah? You think it's funny?" I said. "Come on, I have to show you something," I told her, confident that the writing on the mirror will convince her. But as we went into the bathroom, it was gone. The mirror was spotless. "Is this one of your pranks? Did you watch too many YouTube videos?" she said, while kissing me on the cheek. "I'm gonna go change," she told me and left the bathroom. I remained there, stunned. I knew I had proof, but it was gone. Then everything was fine for a couple of days. Again, the time to be home alone came. She had some errands to run around town, and I had to work from home. At around noon, the crying started again. I tried my best to ignore it, but this time it got louder and louder. It was like I was the one being accused of leaving the person alone. I don't know if it was a man or a woman's voice. It was distorted, as if it came from an old radio with bad reception. I went insane. I wanted everything to stop. "I'm gonna find you!" I yelled. Then I went in the garage, my vision filled with rage, and grabbed a sledgehammer. I started smashing all the walls while cursing and telling the voice that I'm gonna get rid of it. "That's it! I'm gonna find you now!" My voice could be heard between the sound of the walls being hammered down. As I got upstairs in the master bedroom, the crying got so loud that it almost burst my eardrums. "I know you're here!" I yelled before smashing the hammer into the wall. What I found made me put the tool down. Inside the wall, there was a small wooden box. I opened it and saw some pictures. A woman and a man. It looked like they were married. They both smiled. "What the hell?" I said while looking through the photos. At the bottom of the box, a letter was placed. It was dated 1812. "Dear Jackson, long have been the nights since you left me. I weep every waking moment. Are you happy with your new conquest? Have you forgotten about me yet? This is the last night in which I will breathe my last breath on this earth. I bid you farewell and wish you nothing but happiness. Forever yours, Mary." After I finished the letter, my girlfriend came home. She saw the mess, but then I finally had something to show her. We moved out of that place before night came. It seemed that Mary's soul was still trapped in limbo, roaming around the house until eternity, waiting for Jackson to come back to her.
So this happened to me not long ago. You probably didn't hear anything about this incident because, well, the kid's parents are loaded. And I mean, they own the entire town. So normally it didn't become a nationwide event, but let me tell you what went on. Oh, and another thing. Before I start, I just want to say that I won't reveal any real names. I kind of am concerned for my life here. I graduated high school recently. Me and my classmates were always close. Not only that, but we all hung out a lot. But because of this global crisis we're going through, most of the seniors from my year returned to their hometown, including me. One evening, as I was inside, I got a notification on my phone. It was an email from one of my best friends from high school. "Hey, I hope you're all doing amazing. I heard that most of us are home during this pandemic, and I thought it would be fun if we got together at my cabin in the woods right outside of town. And to make things a little more interesting, I was thinking we would have a theme. The dress code is formal, and you're required to wear a mask. That way we won't recognize each other from the get-go. It'll be only until the end of the party that we'll take off our masks. I'll be taking care of all the necessary items, booze and snacks, so you just have to worry about finding a mask and showing up in 2 days. Hope to see you all there. Jackson." I got really excited by that email, and of course I wanted to go. Moments after reading it, I called up my best friend Mike. I asked him if he got invited, and he told me that he was already looking for a mask on Amazon. I don't know why, but I was feeling like I was in high school all over again. I felt happy, free, and without a care in the world. The next morning, I got up pretty early. After a late breakfast and some chit-chat with my parents, I went out to meet up with Mike. We went for a coffee at the local coffee shop, and we caught up for a couple of hours. We talked about all the crazy things we would do, how we skipped class to go to parties without our parents knowing, how we pranked Mr. Anderson, our history teacher, by covering his car with pictures of Roman statues. You know, those that were naked and were showing everything. Oh yeah, we had a good time. "Hey man, do you remember Lisa? I still kind of think about her every day," Mike told me while sipping his coffee and looking down. Lisa was his high school sweetheart. We all thought that they would end up together, but as it turned out, they went to different colleges in different states, and, long-distance relationships rarely work out. "Yeah, I do. You two are like the perfect couple," I told him while smiling. After coffee, we both went our separate ways. The next day, we were supposed to go to the party, and I hadn't quite found a mask yet, so I needed to hurry up. That evening, I found the perfect one. It was white, with 2 holes for eyes, but they were covered in some sort of net so you couldn't quite see the eyes. And instead of a mouth, it had some vertical and horizontal black lines. It was pretty simple, yet it really caught my eye. I placed the order, and the next morning I had it at my door. The dress code was also formal, so I looked through my closet and was surprised to see that my blue jacket from high school still looked good on me. Fast forward, and I was in front of Mike's house, picking him up so that we'll go to the party together. I didn't know the mask he bought, so I was patiently waiting in the car to see what he looked like. Not long after I arrived, he came out of the house. He had a black jacket on with a white shirt, and the mask, it was gold. It looked like a minimalist portrait of a lion or some sort of jungle cat, but all shiny. "Hey man, great mask. Are you ready to party?" I asked him while chuckling. "You know it, let's go." he said, and off we went towards Jackson's cabin. After about a 20-minute drive, we arrived, and there were so many cars it looked like a car dealership. You nervous to see Lisa? I asked him while we got out of the car. She must have got a mask on. I don't know if I'll recognize her. Now come on, I want a drink, he said while we walked towards the cabin. The place was packed. I think half of the graduates were there, and the music was blasting. Suddenly, we got greeted by a tall guy wearing a mask that resembled a giraffe. Hey, welcome, he said. We didn't know who he was. It's me, Jackson, the guy said, taking off his mask. I know we're not supposed to show our faces, but as the host, I guess I had to, he told us while putting a hand on each of our shoulders. Come on in, grab a drink, it's gonna be wild, Jackson told us, and then we went towards the bar. After a couple of drinks, we loosened up and started to mingle. There were so many interesting masks that night, but one of them stood out in particular. It was a mask similar to the ones the henchmen wore in that show's Squid Game. You know, all black with a white square in the middle. I went over to that guy to tell him that I'm also a fan of the show. Hey man, nice mask. I binge-watched all 9 episodes in one night, I told him. But the guy didn't respond. He just turned around and seemed like he was going upstairs. I didn't mind that he didn't talk to me, even though I found it kind of odd. After about 10 minutes, we were all startled by a loud noise. It sounded like a gunshot. No one screamed because we were taken by surprise. We started looking around, but everyone seemed as confused as I was. Another gunshot caught our attention. It came from up the stairs. There he was, the guy with the Squid Game mask. Listen up. I don't like the theme of the party, so I'll change it to a Squid Game theme. You're all going to participate in several challenges, and whoever loses dies, he said. Who the hell are you? Get down from there with that fake gun. The one holding the gun didn't say anything. Oh, so you're not going to say anything? Fine. You think it's funny? Answer me! We all saw the gun being raised slowly. I was holding my breath. No one said a word. The gun went off, blood splattering all over the wall and all over us. The corpse fell down the stairs and stopped at my feet. I looked up and then I realized the guy was for real. A second after the death of one of the people attending the party, most of us started to run around frenetically, not knowing where to go or what to do. But I just stood there in one place, replaying the scene that I just saw over and over in my head. I was shocked, and my body didn't respond. Quiet! The guy with the Squid Game mask said as he shot his gun in the air again. Everyone stopped. They were all paying attention to him. I made sure while all of you drank and told your stupid jokes and fake stories to lock all the doors and windows so that none of you would escape. Also, I have a request, he said. No one asked him what it was. We were all too concerned for our lives. Next, we saw him coming down the stairs, and everyone took a couple of steps back, not wanting to be the next person to die. As we were all quietly watching, he went over to the long table on which all the snacks were. He reached for a bowl of chips and dumped it on the floor. What is this guy doing? I thought to myself while carefully watching his every move. All right, I want you to form a line and put your phones in this bowl. We're going to play some games, and we don't need any distractions. But I need to call my boyfriend, one of the girls said. Everyone stepped aside until she was right between the 2 rows of people. Do you want to fuck him again? The guy asked the girl while slowly raising his gun, pointing it right at her. She knew what she had to do. Come on, don't be shy, the guy continued. The girl started walking forward while we all looked at her. She put her phone in the bowl, followed by the rest of us. Then, after that task was completed, the guy threatened us again. He said that if he sees any of us doing something suspicious, he was not afraid to get low on ammo. The message was loud and clear. Good. Now, I want you all to listen very carefully. We will play 3 games: hopscotch, hangman, and finally duck, duck, goose. Whoever finishes all 3 games alive will have the opportunity to leave this house, the guy told us. I was familiar with the TV show, so I knew that every game had to have a catch. He immediately gave the order to draw hopscotch squares on the floor, and one girl who had some lipstick on her drew it. I believe you all know the rules, but there's a catch, he said, while I was certain something would come up. 2 people will be on the squares at a time. After one of them finishes and has to come back, another one will start. The person who falls and steps out of the square will be shot in the head. Any questions? He told us. People refused to attend the game. They said that if we unite, he can't kill all of us. I could sense he got angry. He immediately went right to the guy who said that. You lost, the murderer said before blowing his brains all over the wall. Without saying a word, we started playing. It was hard enough to maintain balance, let alone do it with another person passing by you. The first person threw the shooter, which was a bottle cap. He successfully reached the end and turned around, still on one foot. The next person threw the bottle cap and started hopping. The 2 met in the middle. All of a sudden, the girl crashed into the first player and falls outside the squares. The one wearing the Squid Game mask approached her. No, please, spare me. I have to go back home, please, she cried as she grabbed his leg, but that didn't do anything. The psychopath pointed the gun at her, and in cold blood, he shot her right between the eyes. His 3rd murder, and he didn't seem to be bothered by that. The reality hit me. I had to stay alive. I had to not fall or step outside of those stupid squares. The players went on one by one. I was last. While they were playing, 3 more people died. We were all white in the face, and our hearts were beating like crazy. Mike made it back, and he stood on the sideline. I looked at him, but he had his head down. As he came back during the game, a guy who was hopping in the other direction fell. Mike blamed his death on himself, thinking that maybe he could have given him more room. My turn came. I started hopping as the other player was coming at me. We looked each other in our eyes, and in midair we moved our bodies in such a way that we passed each other without falling. Congratulations to the ones who successfully finished the first game. You may grab a drink and return for Hangman, he said. While we were drinking, a guy asked me what was that game about, as he hadn't seen the show. I explained the rules, and then went into the middle of the living room and sat in a circle. After we did, the guy explained the rules to us. In this game, if any of you misses a letter 2 times in a row, you will be killed. I was freaking out. What if I don't know the word? I thought to myself. The murderer took the girl's lipstick and started writing on an empty wall. He was the one picking the word. We all said one letter, taking a turn. I knew that if I first start with the vocals, I would have a better shot of not missing too much. I noticed that it was a 7-letter word. N, said a girl. The guy put a symbol under the drawing of the hangman to symbolize that she got one wrong. L, another one said. Again, another symbol. Finally, it was my turn. The 7-letter word already had 2 of them figured out. I thought about the vocals. I said, and I felt relieved as I saw that I got it right. 3 letters were up on the wall, M, T, and I. As each one of us said letters, 2 gunshots made it difficult for the ones left alive to think. The guy killed 2 people. There were 4 of us left. Me, my best friend Mike, and Jackson, and a girl. Now the word only missed 2 letters. I was so nervous that my hand shook, but I had to stay composed. R, Jackson blurted out. The criminal even laughed as he raised his gun. He fell right next to me, his blood splattering all over my face and clothes. I couldn't move. Finally, the word just came to me. I figured it out, but I was so nervous that I didn't wait my turn. Mistake, I said. You didn't follow the rules, the criminal told me as he approached me and raised his gun. I closed my eyes, waiting for everything to be over. Stop it! You killed so many of us! What type of person are you, you murderer? The girl suddenly said out loud. I opened my eyes and saw the killer walking toward her. He pointed his gun at her. Shut up, he ordered her. The girl stood up and yelled, I hope you rot in hell! Right before he shot her in the face through her mask. Her mask fell off as she fell to the ground, lifeless. Mike stared at her without saying anything or even reacting. It was Lisa, his high school sweetheart, the love of his life. He couldn't believe that she was dead, and it all happened right there, so close to him. The murderer turned toward me. He had to finish the job. I clenched my jaw and I started to breathe heavy. You are disqualified, the murderer said. Suddenly, Mike jumped him from the side, knocking him down to the floor. They were fighting over the gun, and seeing that he needed help, I snapped out of the state of shock I was in. I didn't want to go through this last stupid game he had in mind. I jumped in, ready to disarm the murderer and put an end to this, and I was determined to end this entire sick game. And it did end, but with another gunshot. In the scuffle, my friend fell to his side, and blood came out from under his mask. I was still focused on the murderer. The gun was on the floor, and I took off his mask before starting to punch him until he went unconscious. I then checked on my friend. He was barely hanging on, having a giant wound in the middle of his chest. I got my phone and called an ambulance and the police. Unfortunately, when they got there, Mike passed away. There was nothing I could do. I was so mad that I went back to the murderer and started hitting him again. The police officers were able to get me off of him. "Who are you? You weren't even in high school with us!" I yelled. "Of course you don't remember me," he said while he was taken away in custody. Later, I found out who he was. One of the nerds, the losers, or whatever you want to call them, from back in high school. He was always picked on, and it seemed that he wanted to get revenge. Many people died that day, and I was lucky to be the one getting out of it alive. I will always miss Mike, but he did save my life, and I'll always be grateful for that.
For the past 2 years, I have worked for a service that places house sitters with clients in need of such people. Besides having to sit in 1 or 2 dirty homes, my job has been without note. There would be no indication that this following position would be any different. I arrived just before 7 a.m. as I was instructed. My clients were on their way out. They were a young couple with 1 child heading on their first family getaway since the pandemic began. The father left me with a few last instructions and they were on their way. The house itself was a nice 2-story structure you often see in more affluent areas of the country. Not my most posh assignment by far, but very comfortable nonetheless. I unpacked my things in the guest bedroom and made myself familiar with the home's layouts. From the look of things, my stay would be a quiet one. I expected to spend my times as I usually do, watching a film or 2 on streaming services or catching up on my YouTube subscriptions. For the first 3 days, everything played out as I had planned. It would be the 4th, which I'd be tested in a way I never thought possible. When I rose from bed that Sunday, the sun was just beginning to peek over the trees. I prefer to awake early when I am working just in case someone is scheduled to drop by. My livelihood relies on my good reputation. I never want to endanger that, and people do talk after all. Just after 7, I sat down to do some paperwork and heard a knock at the door. I answered, and a tall, muscular, older man introduced himself as Chris. He was the neighbor directly across the street. He proceeded to warn me about a recent string of home invasions happening in the city. Although there had been no indication these criminals had designs on the specific neighborhood, he felt it was necessary to let me know this. I assumed to keep my eyes open and stay safe, and we spoke a further few minutes before he said goodbye and I returned to my work. This news was somewhat concerning, but I felt safe. The family surely would have warned me. I assumed that Christopher was being overcautious and tried to put it out of my mind. The remainder of my afternoon was wasted in front of the television, a pastime I seem to enjoy more and more as I age. At around 5 p.m., I decided it may be time to make dinner. There were several large frozen meals available, so I heated one in the microwave. Just as I was sitting down to eat, a knocking came at the door. For the second time, Chris was there to warn me. Only this time, he insisted he had noticed an SUV with dark-tinted windows driving around. They had passed down the street several times. I was kind and didn't laugh in his face, but I wanted to. I thanked him and we went our separate ways once again. I now knew who he was. Most neighbors had that retired person that stares out their windows all day, waiting for the smallest thing to happen. And this must have been Christopher. Despite his entertaining behavior, his repeated interruptions were becoming a bother to me, I thought. And I was fortunate enough to avoid any further interactions with him for the remainder of the day. I slept and rose again just before dawn. I expected Chris would arrive soon, but I was able to enjoy my morning meal and paperwork without any further annoyances. Things were pleasantly quiet, and as I sat down to watch a film, I was beginning to believe that I may have the day to myself. unfortunately, it was not to be. I had fallen asleep, and just after 2 p.m., a ringing of the doorbell shocked me from my sleep. I expected it to be Chris. However, as I peeked through the small window, I saw someone else, another man. He was well dressed, and I assumed was another neighbor. I put on my kindest smile and greeted this random stranger with a good morning. He looked a little confused but quickly regained his composure and asked for the homeowners. I informed him that they were out of town at the moment and told him when they would be expected back. And he just thanked me and smiled. Something about his smile was unsettling. I was unable to end the conversation before the man rushed toward the door. Out of nowhere, another man appeared and joined him. I tried to close the door, but the might of them together was too much for me. I was unsure what they wanted, but I was positive I needed to call for help as soon as possible. With no other option, I relinquished my hold on the door and ran. The men spilled in behind me. I had no immediate plan, but I noticed the stairs and sprinted up to the second floor. I just needed enough time alone to dial 911. Thankfully, I got it when I jumped into a hallway bathroom. The two men were close behind me, and fortunately, I was able to get the door closed and locked before they could reach me. I pulled my phone from my back pocket and dialed as quickly as possible. I could feel the men's bodies banging against the doors. The operator answered, and I gasped out my trouble between heaving breaths, and not long after, the banging stopped. A loud yelling and rumbling replaced it. Then I heard what sounded like a group of people running down the stairs. Everything went silent after that. The operator continued to talk. I put my ear to the door, and there was nothing for almost a minute. Then a faint voice said my name. It was weak at first. I almost thought it was my imagination, but then it came again. It was now much stronger and closer, and I realized it was Christopher. I meekly answered. I was still unsure of what was happening. "The men are gone. I got a piece of one of them, but I guess they didn't want no more." I did consider that this may be a trap, but I took a chance and opened the door. Standing in the hall was Chris with a bleeding cut above his right eye. He had a big grin across his face, and I got the impression he'd enjoyed his brief fight with the home invaders. We exchanged "Are you okays?" and I thanked him for arriving when he did, and I meant it this time. We met the police at the door and filled them in on what had happened. The paramedics fussed over Chris's cut, but he refused care, and we spent an hour giving statements. When all was said and done, I had to admit I owed Christopher a lot, perhaps even my life. It seems like he was just happy to be right. Once the officers had gone, he wished me luck and returned home. It wouldn't be until I was alone that the seriousness of it all hit me. I spent the evening curled up in a ball on the couch and stayed there until the following morning. I was still quite shaken up, but I was alive. Christopher and I would never speak again. Other than a smile and a wave when I visited the mailbox, life had returned to normal. I didn't want to ruin my client's vacation, so I waited until they returned and notified them of the attempted robbery. They were naturally horrified and even offered me more money. I, of course, refused. I did make sure to let them know that they had an amazing neighbor. And to my shock, they mentioned they had only spoken to him once in the 5 years they had lived there. This made our interactions over the last week seem even more special. I sometimes wonder if Christopher had been put in place to keep me safe, maybe like a guardian angel. I'm well aware of how foolish this sounds, but I believe it nonetheless. I'm pleased to say none of the other jobs have been quite as exciting as this was, and I have yet to meet another man as kind and selfless as Christopher. I know no amount of thanks can ever equal your actions. On that day, you saved another man's life, a complete stranger. Somewhere out there in the world, a man lives happy today because of your selfless act. May your life be long and happy, and may your family remember you forever.
I was looking for a job for some time, but nothing really spoke to me, especially because the pay was so low. But one day, as I was walking on the street, I stepped in a puddle. "God damn it!" I said while I looked at the ground. My sneaker was soaking wet. I got so pissed off, but I saw something next to my foot. It was a blank piece of paper. I found it odd, I don't know why. Something told me to pick it up, and so I did. As it turned out, it wasn't what I initially thought. It wasn't just a blank piece of paper. Upon flipping it around, I saw a help wanted sign. There weren't many details there, but there were enough to spark my curiosity. The sign said, "Help wanted, Maynard Asylum. No experience is needed, attractive salary." It was blunt and straight to the point, but that's exactly what I needed. An attractive salary, I said. Now that's what I'm talking about. I went home that evening and researched everything I could find out about the asylum. I mean, I was aware of its existence, I knew it was right outside of town, but I had never really been there. All I knew before researching was information that came from all kinds of stories. Stories about crazy people, stories about ghosts, and stories about murders. Of course, I didn't believe any of it. It was just a building, helping people with different mental problems, if you can call them that. After a quick Google search, I found out that the asylum was built around the 1940s. It was an old building, and the person who constructed it from the ground up, along with a crew of not so many people, was a psychiatrist who died just 4 years after it opened. That's all the information I found. But it was okay. That was all I needed. The next morning, I was ready to change my life. All I had in mind was the fact that I was going to make a lot of money and live exactly how I wanted, without having to flip burgers and worrying about whether I would have to put gas in the tank or buy groceries. I brushed my teeth, ate a quick breakfast, and I was off to the asylum. Okay, that doesn't sound right, but you get the idea. I went out the door. The sun was shining. Everything just felt right. I went to the bus station because my car was out of gas and patiently waited for it to come. "This will all change. I can't wait to use my car again," I said, while imagining the money I would make. I had no clue of the requirements needed for me to get hired, but my confidence was sky high, and I knew I just had that job in the bag. In about half an hour, I was there. The building was quite tall, and it had an eerie vibe to it. It looked deserted, but since they needed help, I guess the old saying goes, don't judge a book by its cover. The gate was also very tall and in some sense intimidating, but I still went through it. The courtyard was empty, nothing as far as the eyes could see. I reached the front door, which was made of wood. I just went right in. The place was quiet, almost too quiet. The sound of my shoes on the tiles being the only thing making noise. "How may I help you?" A voice startled me. I turned around and saw a small man. Couldn't have been more than 5 feet tall. He had thick glasses and bald patches all over his head. I pulled up the help wanted sign. "I would want to apply for this job," I said before introducing myself. The man smiled and shook my hand. "Yes, let me explain what we're looking for. First of all, do you have any experience working in an asylum?" he asked me. No, but I'm a fast learner and a hard worker," I told him, using every cliche you'd say at a job interview. He seemed pleased with my answers, but what he said next was a bit unexpected. He said that I just needed to keep an eye on the place. Just walk around, make sure no one comes in during the night, that sort of thing. "That sounds great," I said, thinking it's the easiest job in the world. Oh, and the pay. It was well above minimum wage. I was so excited to start, but I didn't have to wait long. That night, at 10 p.m., I was at the gate, ready to step into my new duties. I walked in and the same man greeted me. He told me to call him if I needed anything or experienced any problems. He gave me the phone number and left, leaving me to, keep an eye on things. As time went on, I felt sleepy rather than anything, so I started to walk around the halls. It seemed that no one was there. To my left and my right, there were all sorts of rooms, and each door was labeled as patient 1, 2, and so forth. "This is weird," I said as I continued to walk forward, checking everything out. At 12 a.m. sharp, a loud noise pierced my ears. It sounded like one of those old clocks that you'd have on the wall. I could hear while I felt like the walls were shaking. "What the hell is with this clock?" I yelled, but it stopped right after it rang 12 times. I got up from my crouched position, and all of a sudden, it was like the entire place came to life. I could hear all kinds of sounds coming from different rooms. From the room labeled Patient 8, I could hear screams. I knocked on the door, but the screams didn't stop. Being curious, I slowly opened the door just to see a disturbing image. It was a woman with white hair, blood all over her nightgown, scratching her arms until they bled. "Are you okay? I'll call an ambulance," I said while freaking out. But the woman didn't acknowledge me. I closed the door and dialed 911, but I had no signal right there in the asylum. The walls were too thick, so I quickly went towards the entrance to get outside, but the door was closed. I tried pulling it multiple times, but it didn't budge. I then called the man who hired me, but again, no signal. "What the hell is going on here?" I said. I ran back to Patient 8 to try and help the woman, but the door was closed. The screaming stopped, so I guess she settled down, but I was still nervous. As I walked back, a loud boom scared me. I looked to my left. It said Patient 20, and the sound came from the inside. Again, I knocked on the door, and surprisingly, someone answered. "Yes, come in," the voice said. It sounded like an old man. I opened the door and saw exactly that. An old man sitting on the bed. I entered and said hello, but I saw that his hand was under his pillow. "Come closer," he said while smiling. I wasn't exactly comfortable doing that, so I refused. He asked me again, this time without a smile and frowning his brows. "Come closer." "Why?" I asked, taking a step back. All of a sudden, the man started yelling and pulled out an axe from under the pillow. He charged right at me, but I managed to get out. I noticed that the door had a lock on the outside, so I turned it, not letting the old man come outside with the axe. I then heard screaming and threats from inside the room for a couple of minutes until it stopped. I wasn't going to go in there anyway. I didn't care what he did to himself. I was not going to put my life in danger. I continued walking, and a cry for help came from the room labeled Patient 13.
"Help, I think he's
The
dead."
woman screamed. I didn't exactly want to go in, thinking of what happened before, but the woman kept crying out for help, so eventually I opened the door. I saw a woman sitting in a corner. She was crouched down and crying. "Are you okay, ma'am?" I asked.
"He's dead,"
she said, while remaining with her face towards the wall. "Who? What are you talking about?" I asked.
"My son."
She said before turning around with a small baby in her arms.
"He's dead!"
She screamed, and just like the old man, she charged towards me. I quickly went out and locked the door. "That's it," I said, and I ran towards the entrance. Even though the door was closed, there was still one more hour until the guy came back, and I waited there. Fortunately, he came exactly when he said. "Hello, how did everything go?" he asked with the same smile. "Really?" I asked. Then I proceeded to tell him what I encountered. "I don't even want to know what kind of people are in the other rooms," I said. The man laughed and told me to follow him. As we walked towards the rooms, he said, "The asylum is empty. You don't think I'd hire an inexperienced young man to watch over mentally disturbed patients, do you?" I didn't know what he meant, but soon we reached the room. He then proceeded to open every door. "See? Empty," he said. "But I saw them," I said. "Well, they're not here anymore. They are, but in a different form, if you know what I mean." What? I asked. The man smiled. A second after that, I went straight through the main door. I didn't want anything to do with that place or with that weird guy. Even today, years after it all happened, I stay far away from that place.
Back in my early 20s, I used to work for a relatively small security contractor. It was a privately owned operation with around 30 employees in total, so we were all pretty tight. We get a contract with a factory or a shopping mall, and then it was down to us to sit in that factory for 8 to 12 hours at a time when the place was closed. So more often than not, I'd be standing guard overnight by myself, completely alone in a totally empty facility. In my 2 whole years of working security, not once did I see a single thing that I could call supernatural. I see a lot of nonsense stories about seeing spirits or hearing voices from beyond, and they make me laugh every time. Some of them are well written, I'll say that much, but anyone who's ever worked night jobs knows that it's not ghosts or ghoulies you need to be afraid of. It's people that are the real danger. Now with that in mind, let me tell you about Pete. After about a year of working with a security firm, I was given the responsibility of training new team members. This meant more money, but it also meant I had the pleasure of dealing with some pretty unsavory potential candidates. So when my boss calls me and asks if I can meet a trainee at some faraway site at 5 in the morning, I wasn't entirely thrilled. But still, I accepted. Such an early call meant a few hours of double pay, and this is not something I could have turned down. The following morning, I rock up to the parking lot of this large factory complex, still nursing the flask of coffee that had been keeping me warm on what turned out to be a frigid Michigan morning. It's about 4:45 in the morning, and I'm still half asleep. So I step out of the car to smoke while I wait for the new guy to show up. I'm not waiting for long when a car pulls up, so I assume this is the trainee and starts walking towards the car as it slows down in the lot. That's when the engine of the car revs wildly and it takes off again. Obviously, I'm a little startled by this, so I just ignore and stand there, watching in wonder as this car begins to kind of circle the parking lot, driving erratically the whole time. This is the guy I'm going to be training. Some twitchy tweaker who's never going to pass the probation period. Fantastic. I finish my smoke as the car finally comes back around and parks up not far from where I'm standing. But the driver doesn't get out. He just stares at me from his seat, eyeing me suspiciously as I'm just sort of staring back with this confused look on my face. That's when I notice the 2 kids in the back seat. No older than 10 or 11, and I really start to wonder what's going on. It dawns on me that this isn't just any old trainee. Not at all. This is Pete. Pete is super rough looking, like he'd been a coal miner and heavy smoker since a single-digit age. His clothes and mannerisms placed him in his mid-30s, but the guy didn't look a day older than 50. God knows what sort of things he'd subjected his body to over the years, but if I had to guess, I'd hazard that it began with M and ended with Eth. No taller than 5 foot, Pete was wider than he was tall, with a painful, crusty-looking rash covering large patches of his face, neck, and arms. He gets out of the driver's seat, closes the car door, then commences to speak.
This place ain't easy to find.
His rough voice sounds like gravel, if gravel could smoke a pack a day. He then extends a hand for me to shake, and when I look down, I notice he's missing 2 of his fingers. I try not to stare and simply return the handshake, feeling pretty bad for the guy even if he is kind of weird. The sympathy doesn't last long. One of Pete's young kids opens the car door and attempts to clamber out of the car. The kid is also overweight, has a similar rash, but unlike his father, his face is entirely lacking in symmetry. I mean, the kid was hideous.
Dad, can I?
The kid begins, but Pete hears this and cuts him off before he can finish.
Get back in the car, Jacob,
he barked, so loud and angrily that it practically made me jump.
Get back in the car and don't you dare get out again.
I'm just stunned at this. I cannot believe this guy is talking to his own kid like this in front of a prospective colleague. But no matter how much I initially dislike him, I still have to show him around the factory space and give him a rundown of his job description. So I'm pretty nervous as I begin to take Pete around the factory's perimeter fence, explaining the patrolling system we have to ensure any fencing or barriers aren't compromised. I show him all the emergency procedures we follow if a break-in should occur. All that stuff, when I notice that Pete smells really bad. It sounds mean, but I wasn't surprised in the least bit. I mean, since when does a guy like that smell like roses? But it was the questions he was asking me that I found really disturbing. He asked me if I'm screwing any of the girls that work at the factory, if he can hunt on the grounds, that sort of thing. He also took a big interest in any violent or threatening incidents I experienced during my employment, pressing on the details, taking way too much amusement in some pretty harrowing stories. When we're done, he tries making small talk for, I'm not kidding, about a half an hour, just rambling on and following up with the same line of bizarre questions surrounding my personal life. I immediately call my boss and tell him just how weird and sketchy this guy is. How it was nice of him to give the guy a break, but I thought he'd be a serious risk to company contracts. But my boss didn't want to hear it. For some reason, he was dead set on giving the guy the job. I wondered if we were even talking about the same person and actually asked at one point if we're still talking about this Pete guy. That's when my boss flipped out on me. He told me not to question his judgment and to be back the next day at 5 in the morning to carry on with Pete's induction. He'd never ever spoken to me like that before. I'm pretty sure he'd never spoken to anyone like that before. Just who was this Pete guy to him? A friend? A relative, I wondered? The drive back to my hometown took about 2 hours, and the whole time I'm racking my brain as to why my boss would defend a guy like that. There was no way I'm going to call back and ask him myself. But there was also no way I'm going to spend an entire shift with Pete the very next day. Scrubbing myself clean in the shower for like a half hour, terrified that Pete's skin condition was contagious, I mulled over my options. I decided to just bite the bullet and call my boss. After a long conversation, my boss conceded and transferred me over to a different site. I would never have to lay eyes on Pete ever again, but 10 years later that encounter still bothers me. I wonder how Pete's kids are doing, and if they're doomed to live the same bizarre life as their father. I had an exceptionally upsetting incident on my third job house sitting. To help you understand why it affected me so much, I should probably tell you about myself. I grew up in a single-parent home. My mom has always been a loving and understanding parent, but I think she felt pressure to find a new husband. My dad left us soon after I was born. She began dating almost immediately. This pressure caused her to make a lot of bad choices. She did the bar scene, constantly bringing home a new man. A few would stay, but not for long. She never seemed to understand that you don't find a husband in a place like that. Every relationship inevitably broke down into arguments and fighting, and on more than one occasion, the fights got physical on both sides. My mom's love of wine did a lot to inflame tensions. And because of this constant state of chaos, I became a people pleaser and hated confrontation. It's the big reason behind my panic attacks. I've worked a lot on my assertiveness, but I sometimes fall back into my old habits. My story starts in 2015. I was bouncing from job to job. I've been having a hard time finding something in my degree field. A friend had recently become a house sitter and made it sound fun. She made it sound like a permanent vacation, and I desperately needed one of those. She gave me a quick course on the ins and outs of the job and helped me land my first client. I was a ball of nerves, but I got through it. The second client went much smoother. It would be the third that would make me think twice about doing this long term. It was now mid-2016. I answered an ad asking for someone to sit a house a few hours away. This would be my first long-distance gig, and I didn't want to mess it up. I made a list of questions and showed them to my friend. She suggested a few changes, and I called the number. The homeowner and I made an appointment for me to view the property. I quickly made arrangements and drove up to meet him. He was a businessman, needing to leave town on short notice. My job would be to accept packages and mail, but most importantly, look after his dog. The dog's name was Bart. And when we first met, he didn't appear very interested in anything. He sniffed me once and returned to his bed. It all seemed simple enough. I asked a few questions, and at the end of the appointment, we both decided that I'd be perfect for the job. I checked into my hotel for the night and returned the following morning. My stay would be for 3 full nights, and I was looking forward to relaxing and maybe even playing with Bart. That afternoon, I tried to do just that. Bart wasn't interested, though. It was a beautiful sunny day. The slow, cool breeze in the shade made it feel like paradise. The home's slightly remote location allowed for a wonderfully peaceful environment, I felt calmer than I had in a very long time. Bart and I took a brief nap before going back inside for dinner. I ordered a pizza and cheesy bread. Afterwards, I opened a pint of ice cream I bought for such an occasion and parked my butt in front of the television. Bart was proving to be just as easy to handle as I'd hoped. He joined me on the couch and we watched a movie on Netflix. We had completed a little less than half of it before the doorbell began ringing. This wasn't your normal ringing, however. The person was pushing the button over and over again. It was now well after 5 p.m. and I wasn't aware of anyone visiting that late. I did briefly consider not answering it, but the incessant ringing made me think someone may need help. The woman I encountered on the opposite side of the door had very aggressive body language. I didn't say one word before she tore into me. She demanded to speak to the homeowner. I told her he was out of town on business. It didn't seem wise to let her know when he was to return. She didn't appear to believe me. As she spoke, she grew louder and became visibly angrier. I could feel myself getting increasingly nervous, and I did all I could to convince her. Then, she began cursing at me, calling me all these things and terrible words I'd rather not repeat here. She had convinced herself that I was the homeowner's new girlfriend. I hadn't noticed until just then, but Bart had walked up behind me. As he became more enraged, he grew more aggressive. The scene quickly became a cacophony of yelling and barking. I could feel a panic attack was on the way. I was completely overwhelmed by all of it. Bart's booming bark echoed through the hallway. It looked like he would attack her at any moment. And things would only get worse from here. I'm not sure what I said, but it set the woman off, and she lunged at me. Bart reacted by lunging at her. By some miracle, I was able to get the door closed before anyone was hurt. After that, Bart calmed down a bit. He backed away a few feet and sat down, but his eyes stayed glued to the door. I slid down the door and commenced to suffering one of the worst panic attacks I've ever experienced. And the woman continued screaming and pounding on the door, and I was sure that I was dying. To his credit, Bart stayed where he was and did nothing. And minutes passed and I was able to get enough control of myself to call the police. The operator did a fantastic job of talking me down. The police arrived and I made it clear that she attempted to assault me. The officers were understanding and took the woman away with them. I'm not sure if he was formally arrested, however. I was still very shaken. I was a heartbeat away from running back home. In any matter, I had to notify the homeowner of what had happened. He was extremely apologetic and begged me not to leave, but against my better judgment, I agreed to stay. Like I said, I tend toward being a people pleaser. Admittedly, leaving Bart alone after he tried to protect me would have been cruel. We finally agreed that my fee would be doubled. It did feel like extortion, and I knew it may affect my reputation, but I'd already decided this would be my last sitting job, so I accepted. I'd need all the money I could get until I found a new job anyway. The next 2 nights were calm and quiet. Bart stayed by my side the entire time. It made leaving that much harder. The homeowner and I had a brief conversation the morning he returned. He was still very apologetic and explained what may have caused the situation. He and the crazy woman had been dating, but he ended it because of her suspicious and controlling behavior. I didn't inquire any further, and I got the impression he was very embarrassed by her. I'd already been paid, so nothing was keeping me around any longer, except for Bart. I bent down and gave my hero a big hug and kiss on the nose. I could already feel the tears welling up. I didn't want to make a scene of myself, so I said goodbye and jogged away to my car. That was the worst and the last of my brief career in house sitting. I don't miss it for a second, and as for Bart, that's a completely different story.
Cover my shift, please? I looked at Mike and sighed. Sure, I don't have anything to do tonight anyway. I was supposed to get off work in about 30 minutes, but it meant that I'd have to stay for the night shift now. It was hard to resist Mike's baby blue eyes. I worked at McDonald's and was grateful for my job. It came at the time when I was struggling to pay my bills. My parents couldn't cater to my every need, so I had to figure out a way myself. I was in college, but we were on a break at the moment, so it meant I didn't have to rush back to school immediately after my job. I could be out in more hours. Mike waved at me as he hurried out, probably off to some date with his girlfriend. They'd been together for about 3 months and were the cutest thing ever. I took orders as quickly as I could and gave them out just as fast. I wanted to go home and sleep. At 20, there wasn't a lot I was doing besides school. I heard that the world outside school could be brutal, so I tried to take care of myself whenever I could. Whoever was on the last shift was in charge of locking up the restaurant, and I guessed that it was my job to do now. I looked at the time and saw that it was 8:30. I sighed and continued answering the trickle of customers that came in. Finally, the last group of customers left, and I started to wipe the tables before I left. It was around 9. I just finished cleaning the last one when the front door opened. I turned around to tell the person that we had closed when I suddenly stopped. It was a big man and his face looked scary. He had 3 piercings above his right eyebrow and a bushy beard. His eyes looked so small compared to the rest of his face. I swallowed and walked to him, taking small steps. "I'm sorry, but we're already closed." He looked at me, then surveyed the rest of the restaurant. After nodding to himself, he went to sit down at the table I just cleaned. "I only want to stay here for a while. When you're about to leave, I'll go," he said. He looked like he was anxious. I retreated quietly and nodded to him. I couldn't exactly tell him no. I went back to the cleaning and saw that he was looking nervous, glancing at the door every now and then. I wondered if he was avoiding something, or maybe just needed a place to stay for a while. I wasn't sure it was safe being alone with someone I knew nothing about, especially when it turns out that he's not a customer. I finished finally and was about to go to him to tell him I was about to lock up, when I heard a noise at the front door. His eyes went to mine, and I watched as he drew a gun from the waistband of his pants. I screamed and ran to the counter. The front door got kicked open and 2 men stormed in. "Where is he?" one of them yelled before he sighted the man and charged for him. The man fired a shot into the ceiling, and the other men dove to the floor. I heard them groan as they hit the floor. It didn't sound like anyone had gotten shot. I cowered behind the counter and cursed silently. My phone was in the locker at the employees' room, so there was no way to call the police. I covered my ears with my hands and tried to make myself as unnoticeable as possible. I knew they couldn't see me behind the counter, and I hoped they forgot that I was there. A chair scraped at the floor, and I carefully peeked out. The first man was on the floor with the 2 men standing over him. His gun was somewhere else on the floor, and he pleaded with them. "Wait, just give me more time. I'll get the money, I promise," the man yelled, his eyes widening in panic. "Shut up." The other man shot him in the chest and looked up at the sound of my gasp. "Oh shit," I whispered. I ran through the back door, my Converse skidding on the floor. They were right behind me, and I knew that they wanted to eliminate me so that I wouldn't let it out that they just killed someone. My heart was beating erratically, and fear courses through my veins. Never in my life did I think I would be in such a situation. The street was dark, but I could make out a few people just up ahead. If I could reach them in time, they should be able to offer help. "Please help me," I yelled when I got within earshot. The men behind me stopped when they noticed the people up ahead, and I looked back to see them running in the other direction. I pointed towards them. "Those men just killed someone," I gasped out, trying to catch my breath. "And they were about to kill me too." My body started to tremble when I realized the enormity of the situation. If they had caught up with me, I would have been dead. The people I had run up to quickly called the cops, choosing to wait with me as I narrated what happened. We walked back to McDonald's together and saw that the man was still there, blood pooling under him. His eyes were closed, but he appeared to still be breathing. I was still in shock. What had started out as a pleasant night took a sinister turn. The cops arrived and took control of the situation. An ambulance was called for the man on the floor, and he was rushed to the hospital. They claimed he was in a critical condition. The cops interrogated me and made me describe the men to great detail. It wasn't hard for me to do because I still remembered their faces vividly. The one that had shot the man was of average height and was bald. The other one was a bit taller and had a lanky frame. The cops promised to get in touch with me if they needed my help. Frankly, all I wanted to do was to go home and sleep. The night has been exhausting for me. I got dropped off at my apartment, a dingy thing in the middle of my area. I went straight to my room and lied down on my bed. I tried to sleep, but my attempts were unsuccessful. I kept replaying the moment when the man got shot. It was one thing to watch it happen on TV. It was another thing to see it happen right in front of me. My body still had slight tremors. I had never felt as scared as I did when I was being chased by those men, and it felt like they were going to catch up to me. I finally fell asleep and decided that I would never take the night shift ever again.
In 2015, I managed to land my dream job as manager of this really old rustic pub. It was the kind with stained glass windows, ornate bar fixtures, the works. But it was bought up by this big brewery company not long after, and they ended up cleaning house. So within 6 months of getting my dream job, I'd lost it again. I was desperate. I had rent and bills to pay, so I was ready to work just about anywhere, doing just about anything, for any money at all, really. So I ended up getting a job in this 24-hour off license in the middle of town, and it was my job to work the night shift, 8 p.m. until 6 a.m. This place was really busy too. Had a cash machine inside, sold really expensive bottles of premium booze, and was mostly a cash business. It was the place that pretty much every single person who went out to drink and wanted to carry on drinking when the bars closed would stop off to pick up a few bottles before they got a taxi home. So I'm not messing around when I say we sometimes had like 7,000 pounds in cash on site by the end of the busiest part of the night shift. And well, I say we, I mean me, as I work that shift entirely alone. So it's Sunday morning, about 5 a.m., and it's just before Christmas. The off-license had been extremely busy that night, and we had way more than 7,000 pounds on site. Like it had been Black Friday, which in the UK means that it was the last Friday before Christmas, so all the office parties had been in town, spending it up, and they pretty much all wanted booze to go home with, too. There were queues going out the door at one point. Seriously, it was one of the busiest shifts I've ever worked, including in pubs. So by the time it started to quiet down, I was ready to collapse. I remember just sort of resting my head on the counter at one point, thinking I could have actually fallen asleep right then and there. Then I hear the little beep at the door opening. And although I'd rather have flushed my own head down the toilet than serve another drunk customer at that point, I get ready to serve one more person. I look up, and in front of me is this bloke who seems alarmingly sober. Like almost everyone who walked in during those Saturday night shifts were rotten drunk, eyes all glazed over and bloodshot, slurring their words, but this guy is shockingly lucid, which was dead weird. He also keeps his hands in his jacket pockets the whole time he's talking. But it gets even weirder when he greets me by name. I thought he might have known me, and I just didn't recognize him, so I remain polite and say like, "Yeah, that's me. How do you know that?" Then he once again refers to me by name and follows up by telling me where I live. Again, I'm like, "How do you know that?" Only this time I'm also thinking that this is a plainclothes policeman or something, and I've done something wrong, like accidentally sold a bottle of booze to someone under 18, maybe even failed one of those underage tests the police try on occasion to catch businesses. Then he starts asking after my mom, then refers to her by name, and asks about my sister, again knowing her name too. He asks me if they're still living at such and such address, and gives their exact street address. I then apologize and tell them that I just didn't recognize him, figuring that he was an old family friend or something that I'd forgotten all about, but something about him is creeping me out all the same. He didn't once take his hands out of his jacket pockets, like to the point it was getting sort of odd. People talk with their hands all the time, and this guy's hands were like wedged into those front pockets on his jacket. That's when these other guys walk in, who also seem weirdly sober. They were quiet and deliberate in their movements, just pacing towards the counter and flanking the guy who seemed to know a little too much about me. Then really politely, the guy who seemed to know all about where I lived and where my family live asked me if there's a toilet in the back of the shop. I told him there was, and he tells me to walk back into it, lock the door, and not come out for at least half an hour. And just to make it clear that he's not really asking me, he shows me that he's holding something inside his jacket, something heavy. Only then do I realize what's happening. They proceed to take all the CCTV USB sticks, wreck the monitors, break into the safe, rinse the tills, empty the shelves of all the premium spirits. I mean, they absolutely robbed the place blind, All the while, I was just sat in the toilet, wondering how that guy knew where I lived or where my family lived. As they were leaving, I heard footsteps walking up to the toilet door, and I started shaking hard. Then I hear this voice telling me that I did the right thing, for the sake of my family, that all the stuff that they'd taken was insured, that no one but the insurance companies would lose a penny, and it was them who were the real thieves anyway. I ended up telling the police that I didn't get a good look at the guy's face, and that I wanted to help them, but that I just couldn't. I told them that it all happened really fast and that they must have been professionals because I didn't even get a chance to hit the alarm behind the counter. They must have gotten away with like 10 grand all in all, and they didn't even take half an hour to do it, more like 15 or 20 minutes to be honest. And they'd managed to make sure that the one person capable of identifying them wouldn't say a thing to anyone about it. Like I can't even tell you how frightening it was that they managed to work out where my mom and sister lived. People who put that kind of work into criminality, they really are not to be messed with. And besides, it's just stuff, just material stuff. It's not worth losing your life over, and it's certainly not worth risking your family's safety over. No amount of money compares to your own mom's safety.
Are you sure you're not coming with us? My mom asked for the upteenth time. Yeah, I have my school project to work on. Have fun, everyone. I waved to them as my parents and my little brother got into the car and drove off. I walked back inside the house and flipped on the switch in the living room. That was where I wanted to work because I might sleep off in my room. I went to bring in my laptop and sat down on the floor in front of the couch. My family had a party at my dad's company. The company was celebrating 10th year anniversary, and all the employees were expected to show up for the party. I was the first child in just 20 years. My dad said that when I graduated, I would go and work for his company. I wished I could attend the party, but I had a project due, and I couldn't afford to not do it. I typed on my laptop till my fingers started to ache a bit. I finished my project finally around 10 and stood up to stretch my body. My parents said they would be back around midnight, so it meant I'd be alone until then. I was in the shower when I heard a knock on the front door. I thought that my parents and brother were back, and I didn't hear the car pull up into the driveway. "Just a minute," I yelled. I raced down the stairs and opened the door, only to find out that there was no one there. I frowned and looked out. My parents' car weren't in the driveway, so it meant that they weren't around yet? I could have sworn I heard someone knock. After a few minutes of standing outside and not seeing anyone, I shrugged and went back in. I made sure to lock the door because just in case there was someone there. As I went back to the living room, a cold draft blew in, and I shivered. I quickly went to lock the window, and then I froze. None of those windows were open when I was working there. I swallowed and quickly surveyed the house. Was there someone inside? I heard a rustle in the kitchen, and my heart leapt to my throat. There was someone inside. I panicked and looked around for anything I could use as a weapon. My face landed on the fire poker, and I picked it up, the weight giving me some comfort. I tiptoed to the kitchen and peeked inside carefully. The light was on, so I could see perfectly. The fridge was open. "Oh shit," I whispered. I didn't know what to do. My heart was pounding at the thought that there was someone else inside the house with me. I carefully walked into the kitchen and closed the fridge. There was no one there. Suddenly, all the lights went off. I screamed at the top of my lungs and quickly ran to the storeroom to hide. Screaming was a wrong thing to do. It might alert the person to where I was. The house was pretty big, so it might be difficult to be found out on time. Sweat ran down my face, even though I just showered. I was scared. Whoever it was had to put off the main switch. What did this person want? I remembered the fire poker in my hands and got a burst of courage. I wouldn't let anyone terrify me in my own home. I went back out thinking hard. I had the advantage here. This was my home, and I knew where everything was, whether it was dark or not. I walked without hesitating and stood in the middle of the living room. It was pitch black, but I made no noise on my way. Somehow, unconsciously, knowing where everything was, There was a muffled thud coming from upstairs and someone cursed. It sounded like a man's voice. I comforted myself with the fact that he probably didn't have anything he could harm me with, because if he did, he wouldn't be sneaking around in the house. He would have just confronted me and wouldn't need to put off the lights. "I can hear you!" I yelled, knowing that he couldn't see me with how dark it was. But if he took the bait, I would hear him come down the stairs. Just as I expected, he crept down the stairs silently. There was one particular step that always creaked, and it did so when his leg landed on it. His steps stopped for a few seconds, and then he continued again. He was now downstairs and seemed to be walking very quietly. My eyes had adjusted to the darkness because he was moving. I could make out his form. He was walking back towards the entrance. He probably had no idea that I had locked the door. I stayed where I was, seeing no reason to draw his attention to me. It was even better if he left me alone. At least I would know that I was safe. He reached the doorknob and turned it carefully. The door didn't budge. "Fuck!" I heard him whisper. He rattled the door again, showing his desperation. I heaved a sigh of relief because I was sure that he was unarmed. With the noise he was making, he didn't hear me silently creep up behind him. I swung the fire poker and it connected with his back. "Ah!" he yelled, crashing into the door. I hit him again and he yelled, "Wait, please!" I didn't listen to him as I hit him the third time. He groaned, still holding on to the doorknob. Just then, headlights shined through the windows. My parents were back. I stepped away from the man as the door got unlocked from the outside. The door opened a few inches before being stopped by the man's body when he still crouched. "What's going on?" asked my dad. "Josephine?" "Dad, there's someone behind the door. Push it!" I yelled. The door got forced open, and my parents came in with fear written in their faces. "Jack, check what's wrong with the light," my dad ordered my brother. They asked me who was in the house and immediately called the police when I explained what happened to them. Jack switched on the main switch and the house got flooded with light, giving me a clear view of the man bleeding on the floor. He had a dejected look on his face, as if he knew he was already caught. My dad was standing behind the door, eliminating any escape for him. My mom collected the fire poker from my hand and went to drop it in the kitchen. There was some blood on it. I finally sat down, adrenaline rushing out of me. I suddenly felt very tired. I just wanted to go to sleep. The cops came and arrested the intruder. They told us that they had been getting reports of burglary attacks from people living in our area. They interrogated me and told me to get some rest. I headed to my bed and was glad that I managed to finish my project before the drama started. "Let's go skydiving." I gasped at Christine and swallowed hard. She was once again demonstrating her wild side. I asked her why and she merely shrugged and said she thought it was going to be fun. Everyone always said we were opposites, right from high school. Christine was the vicarious one and always managed to get in some sort of trouble. I, on the other hand, usually kept to myself. I disliked the spotlight and tried not to draw attention to myself, which became unavoidable once I met Christine. Most times, she managed to convince me to get on board with one of her crazy ideas, and we ended up suffering the repercussions together. Last summer, Christine thought it was a good idea to pour melted butter on the water slides so we could slide faster. I had broken my arm while Christine had a leg fracture. That didn't stop her from suggesting that we should climb up a huge mast once we got healed. Thankfully, we didn't get injured, but the security guard around that area detained us. I blinked at Christine's wide green eyes twinkling with mischief and sighed. How does one even go skydiving? She explained to me that she got in contact with a guy who was an attendant on planes used for skydiving. It wasn't a lot of money and she would pay for bothering both of us. We only live once, Tam. Let's make the most of it. And like usual, I gave in to her infectious smile. At the entrance of the plane, my legs turned to jelly. We were so high up that the buildings below us were nothing more than tiny specks. Christine, wait, I'm not so sure about this. I started to move back with trembling legs. Even though I had been strapped with a parachute, it seemed so crazy that I would willingly jump off a plane. The instructor strapped behind me tried to calm me down. Don't be a coward. I was sure I was screaming, but I couldn't hear a thing. The wind rushed in my ears, and those tiny specks started to get larger. I gulped, looking down at my impending death. The parachute was deployed, and we floated safely to the ground. I lied down flat on the ground for a couple of minutes, glad to feel solid earth beneath me. Christine's grin was so wide that I forgot about my discomfort for a moment and smiled back shakily. One day, she would make us do something incredibly dangerous. Christine and I were taking a walk through the neighborhood. We had gone out to the movies earlier, and were still talking about it when we passed by the abandoned library. Christine paused in front of it and raised her eyebrows at me. "No," I said, and continued walking. There was no way I would go to that creepy-looking place, especially this late. "Haven't you wondered what's inside? We might never get a chance like this. Come on," Christine urged. I gave an insufferable sigh and gestured for her to lead the way. She squealed and ran up the short steps in front of the library. I looked at the sky as I followed her in. It was getting dark, and I promised myself that we would only stay for nothing more than an hour. I wrinkled my nose from the horrible smell inside. Moldy books didn't smell nice. Christine was waiting for me impatiently, so I hurried up to her. We checked through the entire floor of the library, and they all had the same thing to show: shelves of dusty, moldy books. Christine finally gave in to my pleas that we should leave. As we walked back to the entrance, Christine pointed out a door that we had somehow missed. She turned the handle and it creaked as the door opened. I saw a flicker of light in the distance and froze. When I didn't see it again, I thought it was just a trick my mind played on me. We put on our flashlights and I looked inside. It was a long hallway and seemed to branch off into another room. We walked down the hallway and I noticed that it didn't smell as bad as the rest of the library. It actually smelled like people had been living there recently. When I told Christine my suspicions, she laughed it off and told me I was being paranoid. A door slammed shut and Christine and I screamed. It was the door that led back to the library. We were almost at the end of the hallway, so we couldn't make out if someone was there. "Who are you?" came the voice. It was a man, and he didn't sound happy that we were here. "Why are you disturbing my peace?" he bellowed, and I raised my flashlight to see him running towards us. I turned from him and ran, Christine right behind me. We reached the end of the hallway. There were 2 rooms and I blindly reached out for one, pushing the door open. Christine slammed it shut behind her, and we put our backs against it. "Oh God," Christine sobbed. I knew why she was scared. In those few moments that I had raised my flashlight to the man's face, we saw glimpses of his tattered clothes. He had a long, unkempt beard, and his eyes were bloodshot. I didn't think he was normal. The door rattled as the man rammed into it. It nearly buckled me and Christine off. We applied more force, breathing hard. I was crying too, and I knew that we couldn't hold on for long. He gave a roar and slammed into the door again. Christine and I stood no chance, and he managed to dislodge us. He towered over us, and we shrank back. "Why can't everyone leave me alone?" he yelled, as he grabbed Christine by her hair and lifted her up. She was shaking and begging him not to harm her. I gulped and crawled away from him. He brought up one of his meaty hands and smacked Christine's face. Her head lolled backwards, and I screamed. My scream alerted him to my presence, and he lumbered over to where I was. I crawled away. "Please," I sobbed. "We're sorry." He didn't seem to hear me. He lifted his leg and kicked me. My breath came out of me in a whoosh, and I folded in on myself. He kicked my back again, and this time I screamed. He dragged Christine to where I was and kicked her too. She roused up from her unconscious state and joined me in screaming. Suddenly he stopped, staring into the distance. I heard it then, the sirens. He roared with displeasure and ran out of the room, leaving Christine and I bloodied on the floor. The police got our statements and explained that the man was a schizophrenic patient who escaped from the mental ward. An ambulance was called for us and we got treated. My parents forbade me from seeing Christine, and it was something I was grateful for. I went back to my quiet life and kept to myself. I've had enough adventures for one lifetime.
There is always something special about Thanksgiving. I don't know what. Maybe the giant turkey that took over half the table. Maybe the relatives who would come to dinner and after that start arguing over the most trivial thing. Maybe the cranberry sauce, which was the thing I was in charge of ever since I was a kid. I don't know. But it's something magical in the air every time. This happened 2 years ago. I was 16 at that time. That day, as I woke up and went to brush my teeth, I heard something in the street. With the toothbrush in my mouth and drooling toothpaste all over my slippers, I took a look out of the window. There, I saw a woman. She was running down the street toward the dumpster. But that wasn't the weird part. She was holding a pan in which a turkey was burning. I laughed and sprayed toothpaste all over the mirror. I then did my business, got out of the bathroom, put on my clothes, and wanted to go eat breakfast. But something told me to look out the window one more time. And boy, how I regret doing that. I looked out and saw her next to the dumpster, on her knees, crying her eyes out. I didn't understand what the big deal was. It's just a turkey. People are so sensitive these days, I said while I reached to pull the drapes. But as I did that, she turned her head and she looked right at me. Oh crap, I said. I couldn't move. How could I just stand there, watching a crying woman, and not go out and ask her if she's okay? I mean, my mom and dad taught me better than that. So I closed the drapes, put on my shoes, and went outside. I could hear her crying from inside my house. I looked left and right and saw that no one was around. I guess it's up to me to talk to this crazy lady, I said to myself while I started walking toward her. "Excuse me, are you okay?" I asked her. And that's what she needed to stop crying. But don't get me wrong, I would have preferred her to cry than to start talking endlessly about how Thanksgiving is ruined and that she can't even make a turkey and that she's worthless and so on. But there I was, a 16-year-old, trying to console a middle-aged woman whom I didn't know next to a dumpster. "It's okay, we all make mistakes," I said to her. Then the woman got up from the ground. "I'm Marge. What's your name?" she asked me. I introduced myself, and then, out of the blue, she invited me over to her house so we can drink a cup of tea and talk. I wasn't prepared for such an invitation, and I definitely didn't want to go, and I guess she sensed my hesitation. "Come on, George, I'm all alone on Thanksgiving, and we'll just have a cup of tea. It won't take long," the woman told me. How could I say no? I agreed, and then we started walking toward her house. She didn't live far from mine, but I never saw her in the block. On the way there, I asked her if she moved in recently, and she told me that she did, 1 week ago to be exact. We went inside her house, and it looked strange. She had all these little sculptures of cats and dogs, but they were all white and didn't have any details on them. I took off my shoes, as she asked me to, and then she went into the kitchen to make the tea. "Make yourself at home, George," Marge told me, and I started looking around. Besides those creepy sculptures, there were also a lot of pictures. On the wall, on the mantle, and the table. But the only person in those pictures was Marge. It seemed that she didn't have any family. She didn't have any friends or anything. I took a seat on the couch, and something startled me. My heart stopped at the sound similar to a loud screech. "Ah!" I yelled. Marge came running into the living room. "Is everything okay?" she asked. But before I could answer, I saw something jumping from behind the couch cushions. It was a fat, white cat, similar to the sculptures she had all over the place. "Oh, I see you met Snowball. He likes to hide behind the cushions," the woman told me before returning to the kitchen. As I was looking around the place, she arrived with the tea. "It's chamomile," she told me while smiling, revealing a set of yellow teeth that almost made me throw up. "It's fine," I said while taking a sip. It wasn't hot as I would expect it to be. She started talking about her cat and her sculptures. She told me that it was her hobby, and she liked working with her hands. Of course, as fascinating as I found all that information, I couldn't wait to get out of there. "Can I use the bathroom?" I asked her. "Of course, dear. It's down the hall, last door on your left," she told me. I stood up and went over there, all the while thinking that I need to get home. I saw the bathroom at the end of the hallway, but I tripped on something and fell. I guess she didn't hear me. After I got back up, I saw that the carpet she had was out of place, forming a lump. As I tried to fix it, I felt something under it. Didn't feel like normal hardwood. I put the carpet to the side and I saw a small door right there on the floor. As I was normally a curious person, of course, I opened it, revealing a small box. What I saw in that box made my blood run cold. I saw pictures of boys that were probably my age, or even a year older or younger. They were asleep, I hoped. They had their eyes closed, and the pictures were taken at night with the flash on in some sort of a basement or something. "George, is everything okay?" I heard her voice coming from the living room. Yes, fine," I yelled, hurrying to get the photos back in the box and cover everything with the carpet. But as soon as I did that, I turned around, and there she was, Marge, at the end of the hallway. She was smiling at me. That gave me the creeps. "Look, I don't know what your deal is, but I have to get out of here," I told her. It seemed that she was trying to stop me, and I was prepared to fight for my life. But something unexpected happened. As soon as I got in front of her, she moved aside, letting me pass. "See you later, George," she said before laughing. I didn't think much about it, and I continued walking toward the front door. All of a sudden, my knees felt weak. I couldn't stand up anymore, and I fell to the floor. "What did you do to me?" I asked with the last ounce of strength that I had. "It seemed you liked the tea," Marge said before I blacked out. "What the hell?" I said right after I woke up. I looked left and right, but all I saw was the back seat of a car. I couldn't stand up as I was tied. My hands and my feet were immobilized. "Help! Let me go!" I yelled again. It looked like the car was moving. I didn't know where this crazy lady was taking me. After about 2 minutes of consciousness, Marge talked to me. She spoke something that I couldn't understand and started laughing as if everything that was going on was funny. I struggled to get free, but of course I couldn't. The woman knew what she was doing. I wasn't the first kid she had abducted. I kept asking her all these questions, but she just ignored me. Instead of answering, all she did was hum a stupid song. After about 15 minutes of driving, I felt the car veer right. It seemed that we stopped. Marge turned off the engine, and then she put her hand on me. I was stuck in a position where I couldn't see much, but she turned me around so I could face her. She told me not to struggle, and that we're going to have a nice Thanksgiving together. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew I was in a lot of trouble. I knew that my life was in danger, and I had to do anything I could to escape. The woman told me that we're about to go to the edge of town. She rented a place there, and as she put it, it was a cozy place in which to have dinner. She started driving again, but this time, to make sure I was quiet, she put a ball of fabric in my mouth. That way I wouldn't give her any trouble. After about 10 minutes, Marge stopped the car. This time I could see where we were. It seemed that she stopped at a supermarket which was open on Thanksgiving. She turned around with that creepy smile of hers, and she told me to be quiet. Then she took some sort of blanket and put it on top of me. Even though she had tinted windows, she didn't want to take a chance of anyone seeing me tied up inside the car. Marge got out. While I was alone, I struggled to escape. I moved around so much that my wrist started bleeding from the rope. She eventually came back, and I saw that she bought an already cooked turkey. She told me that we're going to have the best Thanksgiving dinner ever. She started the car again, and in no time we were out of town. She ditched the main road and took a left turn. It seemed that we were driving on a country road. I could feel all the bumps in the road from the back seat. "We're almost there," she told me while looking at me through her rear view mirror. She then stopped the car one last time. She got out, opened the back door, and dragged me out of her car. She left me there next to the car in the dirt and told me that she needs to get the turkey inside first. My head was facing the ground, but as I turned around, I saw that we were next to some abandoned building. It was a small building with all of its windows boarded up. Marge came out through the front door, and she was holding a knife. I was scared out of my mind. I thought that she would come and put that knife right between my eyes. As she approached me, I started squirming on the ground. She started laughing and then looked at the knife. "Don't worry, honey, I'm not gonna kill you right here in the open. We're gonna have dinner first," the deranged woman told me. She then dragged me inside. The place was empty. It only had another door, a table, and 2 chairs. I don't know where that other door would take me. Without wasting any time, she grabbed me and placed me on one of the chairs at the table. She was exceptionally strong for a woman her age. Then she took out that ball of fabric from inside my mouth. Finally, I could speak again. "What the hell are you doing? You know you're not going to get away with this, right? I bet my family's looking for me right now," I told the crazy lady, but she didn't seem bothered by my words. She seemed more concentrated on carving the turkey. She cut me a piece, she cut herself a piece, and then she started to eat. I was still tied up, and I asked her, how was I supposed to eat? She told me to use my mouth. But then I had an idea. It was a risky one. I would ask her to help me cut the piece of turkey I had on my plate, and then while she would be close to me, I would headbutt her in the face. "Marge, can you help me cut my food? I don't think I can eat it like that," I told her. The woman rolled her eyes, but eventually she got up from her seat, and holding the knife in her right hand, she marched over. As she was cutting the meat, I hit her right in the nose with my forehead. Marge screamed as she took a few steps back. I thought I would knock her out, but that didn't happen. As she was squirming down there, I grabbed it with my hands tied behind my back and managed to cut the rope. "Finally," I said, while I used my free hands to untie my feet. Marge got up and came toward me, but having the knife, I had the upper hand. "Go right over there and don't make any sudden moves," I told her, directing the woman toward the door, which I didn't know what had behind it. I was pointing the knife at her and told Marge to open it. "You don't want to do that," she said, but I insisted. Finally, she opened the door, and then what I saw shocked me. Several corpses were spread across the concrete floor. They were boys close to my age. They either had their necks cut or were stabbed in the face or chest. "You sick fuck!" I yelled. I noticed that there was a key in the keyhole. I grabbed it and locked Marge inside. The next thing I did was to get into her car and drive to town. I arrived at my house. The police were already there. My family called them because I was missing. I told them everything about Marge, and we went back to the building. As we entered, I noticed that the door was open. I ran toward that room, and then I yelled, "Fuck! She escaped!" There was no sign of Marge, only the corpses I found earlier. The police started an investigation and returned the bodies to their families, but the murderer was never caught. And even to this day, I'm afraid to walk the streets alone. The main reason why I'm telling you this story is to share an experience that happened to me last year. An experience that made me more careful about what I buy online. Let's go back to November of last year. Like a typical 19-year-old, I was into gadgets. I still am. Being passionate about tech and video games, I had a room filled with the latest gaming keyboards, gaming mouses, consoles, VR sets, and the list goes on. To be honest, I had everything I needed in terms of technology. I even had the latest iPhone, the latest Mac, and the latest iPad. But there was something missing. I still needed to buy stuff. I had this burning desire to consume. I don't know why, but I think you all could relate. Maybe our society brainwashed us ever since we were little. On Black Friday, actually the night before it happened, I was browsing the web. Discounts already started at midnight, and I was looking for the next best deal. But nothing caught my eye. "Just a bunch of junk," I said to myself while clicking aimlessly from one page to another. The same old tech, the same clothes, the same everything. "I need to find a better place to shop," I said out loud before getting up from the couch and going to the kitchen to get a glass of juice. As I was pouring some cranberry juice into my cup, I took a sip. And then, out of the blue, it hit me. "I should go on the dark web," I yelled, while a bit of juice spilled out of my mouth, going straight to the kitchen tiles. I grabbed a rag to clean everything up before going to my computer and setting up my browser. I haven't browsed the dark web in ages. I wonder what changed, I asked myself while loading the main browser. Immediately, I got hooked. Many more interesting items were on sale there than on any of the other websites I went on earlier. Of course, being the dark web, I saw weird stuff like spy cameras, guns with the price cut in half, swords with slashed prices, and even services that offered disposing of unwanted items discreetly, whatever that meant. After looking around for some time, I stumbled across some tech. It was a video projector. I didn't have one of those, and it said that it was only $100. "A steal," I said, before continuing to read the description. I had to buy it. And the next thing I knew, I placed the order. I shut down my laptop, happy that I managed to buy something I really wanted. And then I looked at the time. It was past 3 a.m. What the hell? How did it go by so fast? I have to get some sleep, I said, before getting up and heading straight to bed. The next morning at 9 a.m., my doorbell rang. I woke up feeling dizzy and confused. That's how I feel when I don't get enough sleep. I opened the door but couldn't see anyone. Also, the street was empty. No person walking around and no car driving past my house. Damn, I guess they're all shopping for Black Friday, I said to myself. And as I took a step forward, I bumped my foot into something. I looked down and saw a box. It wasn't labeled or anything. It was just a brown box with some tape around it. I picked it up, got it inside, and cut it open. A wide smile appeared on my face. It was the projector I ordered just a couple of hours ago. How did it get here so fast? I said to myself while checking it out. I plugged it in and powered it on. It was straightforward. You could put different USB sticks in so that you could see any movie you'd like. But there was something about it. The video projector had some sort of antenna on it. I didn't notice that in the pictures I saw online. I tried to figure out what it does, but I presumed that I captured some TV programs. I wasn't going to use it, so I just disregarded this feature. The day went on by browsing other websites, maybe to find other interesting stuff. But apart from some PS4 games that were on sale, I didn't see anything to really catch my eye. Evening came and Black Friday was almost over, but I was yet to try out my purchase. I loaded some media on a USB, made myself some popcorn, and then fired it up. The image was not crystal clear, but the fact that the movie could be projected on any surface I wanted really made it worth it. At around 11:30 p.m., I stopped the movie and went to the bathroom. After I returned to the living room, I heard a buzzing sound. It was faint, but I could hear it. It was coming from the projector. I took a better look at it and saw that a small red light was on, right next to the antenna. And instead of my movie, something else was playing. It was a man with a mask on his face looking right at me. But he wasn't doing anything. What the hell? I thought as I sat down on the couch. But as soon as I did, he started talking. Good, you're back. I want to thank you for purchasing the projector, Damien, he said. At that moment, I was speechless. That was my name. How did he know it? But I came to my senses. I figured he got my name from the order details. I want you to relax and enjoy this next game, the guy continued. Then, two people appeared on the screen. On their foreheads were two numbers, 943 and 221. Pick one, the guy said. I thought the projector had voice recognition or something, so I said, 221. Congratulations, subject 221 has been saved, thanks to you, the guy told me before the screen went black. The next thing that I saw was a room, a dark room. The guy called 943 was there, but he was acting crazy. He was banging on the walls and on the door, screaming to let him out. He looked bloody and dirty. I was enjoying this movie I got to see, happily eating my popcorn. All of a sudden, a couple of guys came into the room. The next scenes made my stomach turn. They started to beat him with a metal bar. They were hitting him so hard that his screams would pierce my ears. Blood was gushing everywhere, and the man was crawling on the floor like a wounded animal. But the two men didn't stop until he finally couldn't move. I was shocked. The images were so brutal. They seemed so real. Did you enjoy that, Damien? The guy asked me. Now you are officially part of the game. You were assigned number 1344. After each contestant is eliminated, we pick a random number to take part in the selection. Good luck, he continued. I didn't know what it meant, but as soon as I tried to turn off the projector, my face appeared on the wall. It was a photo, similar to the ones I saw earlier of the two men. Under my photo, it said 1344, the number the guy mentioned. Then, a random number appeared. I felt kind of nervous, and my heart started beating. It stopped at 884 and 324. Congratulations to 884 and 324. One of them has a chance to escape. Good luck, and see you tomorrow, the guy said before ending the video. I went online and started researching this projector, but I could not find anything. The next thing I did was to take it in my backyard and smash it. I don't know what happened to those people. I don't know if I'm still a number in that sick game of theirs. All I know is that I'm still alive, but I have this dreadful fear inside of me each time I'm alone.
Welcome back to my story. As we talked about last time, finding out the game in which I unwillingly decided to take part, I smashed the device in my backyard. Nothing happened for the next couple of weeks. I went on with my life, trying to forget the curious incident that I experienced. But of course, nothing good lasts forever. One evening, as I was scrolling through my phone, I saw a notification at the top of my screen. "Congratulations, you've been selected," it said. I tried to click on it to see from which app it came, but nothing happened. After a couple of seconds, it disappeared. I went through the multitude of apps I had to check if any of them was installed by mistake. Of course, I didn't find anything. I even Googled the problem as I normally do when something comes up, but I didn't find anything similar. As I got a call from some friends to go out to dinner, I quickly put this minor incident aside and went to get ready. After about 15 minutes, they were at my door. "Hey guys, did you ever get a notification on your phone and when you pressed on it, it didn't do anything?" I asked them on the way to the restaurant. "I don't think so," one of them said, and then the other one gave me the same response. "Oh well, must have been a glitch or something," I continued, not wanting my paranoia to ruin my night. We got to the restaurant, took our seats, and the waiter brought us the menu. Everything looked amazing, and that night, I decided to get something fancy, so the lobster was my first choice. After I told the waiter, he smiled and said that the chef will come to the table. I never had anything like that happen to me ever, but it was exciting. 10 minutes passed, and then a tall, intimidating man arrived at our table. "Hello, I understand you ordered the lobster. It's customary that you come to the tank in the back and choose whichever lobster you'd want," he told me as he put his hand on my shoulder. He actually squeezed pretty hard for a second. I never knew why. "That sounds great," I said while smirking at my friends. I felt like I was in one of those high-end restaurants. He escorted me through the dining area, then through the kitchen, and finally in a back room. It was pitch dark. "Are the lobsters being kept in the dark?" I asked while standing still, waiting for him to turn on the lights. Yes. They are sensitive to artificial light," he told me. These words were followed by a loud, high-pitched noise coming from my ears, and after that, I lost consciousness. "Hey, let me go! What's going on?" I yelled as I opened my eyes. I looked around but couldn't see anyone. It seemed that I was in a cage in a basement somewhere with my hands and feet all tied up. "Help!" I yelled, but no one answered me. I had a sticking pain in the side of my neck. Later, I would find out that the reason why I fainted in the restaurant was because the chef stuck a needle in my neck, injecting me with some sort of chemical. I decided that screaming won't help, and I immediately started looking for ways to get out of there. But just as I was doing that, another person entered the room. It seemed that it was another guy, and he was unconscious too. One large man who had a mask on his face carried him to an empty cage right next to mine. "Hey, what is this?" I yelled as I tried to get a response out of the masked man, but he ignored me. I just stood there, dumbfounded, not knowing what to believe. After he shut the door, I looked to my left. The other guy was waking up. Hey, what's going on here?" I desperately asked him. But as soon as he got himself together, I received a response I didn't quite want. "I don't know either." I sat there and thought about it, and then that video projector came to mind. "Hey man, did you happen to buy a video projector on Black Friday?" I asked him. "Huh? Video projector? I don't know," he said to me. "What do you mean you don't know?" I was getting angry. "I got one as a gift around that time, but it turned out it was some interactive crap. I don't like that sort of stuff," he responded. That's the moment I knew that him and I were in that stupid game that the masked dude who appeared on my wall that time lured me into. I knew that in a short period of time, one of us will die. I quickly turned to my left. "Hey, What number were you assigned? I asked the guy. He seemed clueless. I explained to him what's going on and that one of us will be picked to be murdered on a live broadcast. Are you kidding me? The guy said as he opened his eyes wide. He tried to get up, but hit his head on the top of the cage. Before I could explain further, 4 men came into the room. They let us out of our cages and took us into some sort of empty room. What are you doing? Let us go! Are you insane? I kept yelling at those 4 guys. Of course, they didn't mind me. After they threw us on the floor, they left and another guy came in. When I saw him, I immediately felt like I'd seen him before. Then it hit me. It was the same masked man I saw when running the projector. Welcome. As you may know, you are now part of the game. One of you will survive and one of you will die. Of course, this is all up to chance. The players at home need to vote. Good luck. The guy said before leaving the room. I tried to open the room he closed, but since I was tied up, I couldn't do much, and neither could the other guy. At that moment, the same 4 men came back in and made us look at a screen. There, we saw our selected number, 899 and 1344. The latter was mine. We saw in real time how many votes each of us got. And while the numbers were increasing, I realized that more than 10,000 people were involved in this, and they weren't aware that they will die too. Finally, the counter stopped at 6433 for him and 3567 for me. What does this mean? I asked the men, but they swiftly took the other guy away as he was screaming his lungs out. The main villain came into the room. Congratulations, you will live. Of course, you are now free to go. But before we let you out, know this. We will always keep an eye on you and any other lucky contestants. If you say one word about this entire operation, we will know. Understood? Damien, the single child of Anna and Rick? I was speechless. These men were dangerous, and I didn't want anything to happen to me or my family. Yes, I stuttered as they were untying me. I was then escorted through a dark hallway. I couldn't see anything, but could hear the screams of terror the guy who was just sitting next to me was letting out. Apart from that, the noise made by wooden bats bashing his skull made my skin crawl. We reached a door. Goodbye, I heard. But before I could say anything, I felt a pain in my neck, similar to the first one. I was injected again and lost consciousness. I woke up in my bed, in my pajamas, like nothing happened. I was fortunate to be alive, but beware of what type of stuff you buy online.
The first thing I heard when I woke up was, "Good morning, everyone." And when I opened my eyes, I saw about 100 people dressed as I was. The only reason I could tell that we were all medical practitioners was the stethoscope that was hanging by the side of everyone's bed. The door to the room we were in opened up, making everyone to stay alert. The glasses on almost everyone's faces could give them away as nerds. Medical school could do that to people, make you lose your sight or even lose your coordination, your normal motor activity, your sanity, and so much more. Medical school could take that from you, and a lot more. 3 men walked in through the door, or at least I guessed they were guys. I could not tell since they were all covered in masks, cream masks that matched their clothes perfectly. They walked into the room, taking in every detail of each person that was in the room. It was like they had scanners or cameras in their mask that was doing that for them, because of the beeping noises that came from their faces each time they passed by someone. "File up in a single line, please," one of the masked guys said. Polite, yet command was still written all over him. Without thinking of what it meant, everyone filed up in a single line, and after the action, a number showed up on the board which I guessed was the number of people that were there. 100. I was right. I gave myself a mental pat on the back for a job well done. I felt proud of myself. Who wouldn't? It showed how smart I was. I like to be smart. It's how I got in and out of medical school anyway, or how I got through the most challenging time of my life. Medical school was everything that defines stress, but above all, the degree is the most important thing. Here I am, a well-qualified doctor, except the part that includes me being scared of wounds. I had that part to deal with. I was sure every person that stood on this line with me had a reason they were here. Maybe they had fears like me, or maybe they had strength others could learn from. Whatever it was, we were here together already anyway. That would be figured out later. Men to one side of the room, and the women to the other side, please. The same masked person who spoke earlier spoke, causing everyone to divide into groups, each gender going to where they should be. I moved to the female side of the line, although I was a bit intimidated. Almost everyone looked old and matured, like they could answer any questions that they asked them, and I was there, a 29-year-old girl who had just started her journey into the medical world. You are all welcome here. Just so you know, we are still closer to the places you call home. I mean your houses, where you work, and places you are familiar with. Above all that, I welcome you all to this place and to this particular function we call the Game of the Medicals. As you may have guessed, you are all medical professionals, and you will be involved in playing games that has to do with what you've been trained at. Just so you know, we picked the best practitioners from around the vicinity, and I will likely call the game the Tournament of the Smartest. I smiled at his last sentence. I was considered smart. That was more than enough to push me through whatever game they brought. They had an expectation of me before they picked me to compete with other people like me. I have to do my best. Anyway, you have had enough time to rest. You all slept through 24 hours, and we will start the first game now. The same guy said. You can all march after one of my colleagues. He will lead you to the game room. We followed the masked guy who was leading us carefully. We passed through rooms, walking in through dark and light room consecutively. I could not help but think we were still in a hospital. The smell was there, the smell of drugs, the smell of blood, the smell of saline. Just the general smell that was enough to tell you that you had entered a new, feared environment by many people, a hospital. I walked gently behind the person ahead of me. She was shaking. Her hands were fidgeting. She was losing it. Panic ahead, I could tell. Hey, deep breaths. It will be fine. Let's just hope for the best, I told her before rubbing my palm against her skin. Thank you, she replied with a beautiful smile. It was one of the best smiles I had ever seen. She was so pretty and young, like me. I smiled back at her before she turned forward, her panic attack already reducing. The only thing that gave me the assurance that I was going to be safe was the fact that they told us that we were not far from home. There was one thing about New York that was sure. If any of their citizens is declared missing for more than 2 days, they would go searching for the person, and if anything happened to us here, it was sure that they would find us. I had that trust in New York. Eventually, we walked into the final room. It was painted white and no stain was on the wall. It was sparkling. The beds in the room had several people on them, covered in white clothes. Patients. I took a careful look at every other person's face. Most of them had unreadable expressions, but the others had scared, fearful expressions. We had ideas, but we barely knew what we had to do here. We waited for any of the masked guys to talk. We still maintained the line we came in with. I sighed to myself. We all waited patiently for what was to come. One of the masked guys then spoke up. Now, you will all be playing 7 games in total, and I would like to welcome you all to the first game, what we call the primary medical intervention. On each bed is a patient that you are to interact with and diagnose. If you are not able to diagnose the patient, you will be eliminated. I'll repeat the rules. He repeated all what he said earlier, and he asked the first 10 people on the line to pick a bed and start the game, and I was part of them. I stood quietly by the side of my patient with only one thought in mind. What did he mean by eliminated? The buzzer went off and the masked guy spoke again. You have 20 minutes to diagnose your patient. Good luck. I stared back at the wound on my patient's leg, which also stared back at me. A necrotic wound with pus. I wasn't ready for this. I sighed before taking courage to talk to my patient. Just when I had finished talking to my patient, I had only 15 minutes left to diagnose her. From the conversation I had with her, I learned that her name was Annie, and that she had just been involved in a car accident when she was on her way to teach in the school. She was a teacher. I took a close look at the wound and almost puked. It was not the worst kind of wound I had ever seen, but I was just not a fan of what I was looking at, or interested in whatever it could be, or what I could do about it. I wanted to run away, but if I did, how sure am I that the elimination does not mean the literal term? And with that in mind, I picked up the forceps. I had some diagnosis to do. An accident wound was not supposed to be that bad, at least, not with the way my patient had described the accident that took place. There was probably a secondary cause to the wound, and that is what I was trying to know. The time buzzer went off, indicating 10 minutes more, and with that, I tried as much as I could to continue with the dressing, and made sure I finished that before asking the patient any other questions. I finished the dressing on time with just 5 minutes left, and the way I rushed through everything just reminded me of the practical exams we always had as medical students. The time was always never enough. We rushed and ran from one station to another to carry out procedures or answer questions in a few minutes. That was always a tough one. I smiled as the memories played in my head before sitting down to ask my patient the questions in my mind. I spiraled with my questions at first, and with the answer of my patient, I knew what was wrong with her. She told me that her wounds barely healed up. Her skin was very sensitive, and she became fatter in about the past 2 months. Diabetes, I thought to myself. I yelled diabetes out, and every other person looked at me, including the patients that were on the bed. I looked at the buzzer, and it was just 2 minutes left. One of the masked guys came to me and said, "That's correct. Someone would escort you back to your room now." I was about to step out when I heard someone else yell, "Arthritis." I turned back to see the lady that was fidgeting in my front earlier. I smiled to myself, happy that she was safe too. The buzzer went off. Time was up, and it had barely been a second that we stepped out of the door that the door closed behind us, and we heard gunshots. And then it hit me. Elimination meant that those who could not diagnose their patient were going to die. I cringed at the thought that those I was just with a few minutes ago were now dead. We got back to the room we were in earlier, and we both sat, thinking about what just happened. Now, we had to wait to know if anyone from the other rooms also survived, and after a few minutes, 2 other people walked in with their eyes red. They probably just finished crying. They ran to us, their hands full of blood. "They killed the others in our presence," they said. "We survived in the last minute." The 2 men in front of me were in tears. It always said that men should not cry, but these ones didn't care about such ridiculous rules. They cried their eyes out. People were just killed in their presence. After what felt like hours of thinking, no one else was going to show up. 6 other people walked in, and by the countenance on their faces, you could tell that they had just seen what we all saw. It's not that easy to erase such from one's memory. The lady that I came in with and the other 2 men that joined us later formed a circle, but the silence between us was deafening. I had to speak up. "My name is Anna. It is not a bad idea if I know your names. I mean, what else are we supposed to do now? Let's introduce one another. And yeah, I am a doctor," I said first. I figured that if we were going to be together for a long time, hopefully, it was best that we referred to each other with our names instead of the numbers that were on the clothes we wore. One after the other, they told me their names and the thing they do. The lady's name was Grace, and she was a nurse. I could tell that she was still scared, and I pulled her to myself to make her feel better. I was scared too, but I was better at hiding it. I would not like to break down in front of people I was just getting to know. One of the men, the bigger one of the 2, introduced himself as Landon. He was also a medical doctor, and the other man, Luke, was a lab scientist. They said they were twins and moving on in the game. They were really scared that one of them would be eliminated. I sighed again, and I looked around. The room that was full of 100 people just a few hours ago had only 10 left. I thought they said it was a game between intelligent people. How come only 10 survived the game? And that made me think about how many games we had left, and if any one of us seated here would not be able to survive the next round. I feared the severity of different wounds, but I feared death more. I was not ready to die. I still had so much more to do in my life. So much more. The door to the room opened again, and the masked guys walked in with cartons, about 20 brown cartons. There are 10 cartons of food, one for each of you, and 10 cartons containing change of clothes, one for each of you as well. The change of clothes are for preparation of the next game, and the food to keep you energized for the next game. Congratulations on the first game, one of the masked guys said before they walked out, and the door closed behind them again. Each one of us walked to the cartons. I could not get my mind off of what the next game would be. It was sure going to be another diagnosis, as we were all medical practitioners here, but I could not help but think that whoever or whatever we were going to diagnose was not going to be on the preliminary level, an increased level of abnormalities to diagnose. They sure wanted to kill as many people as they can. They probably wanted just 1 or 2 people left to share the money. They did tell us earlier that money was involved for who or those who won. Billions of dollars. I munched on my food while patiently waiting for the next game, and I started to recollect as many abnormalities as I could remember. Who knows if any one of what I remembered was going to be the next case I would solve.